No, hold on. I'm about to go. I'm live now. We are live now. So I'm going.
Honorable Minister.
Hello, how are you?
I am great, sir.
Very
Thank you
well.
very much for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Good, good. I hope this will be one of many.
Honorable Minister, welcome to the 40 people by the people.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Who is that one? Banka?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And then Musa.
We want Musa and the other guy.
Okay.
So,
Banka is the one with the headphone?
yes.
Okay. Fine.
Yeah, Banka is the one with the gray hair. So, you know, the gray beard. So that's how you know.
Don't pay them no mind. Don't pay them no mind.
Very good.
We're going to get started here in a minute. Let me ask these folks to.
Banka, libat for second music guy play this, huh? I'm trying to figure out who these people are, but maybe it's something new. Please, Google a music right, and just play it for us.
They want to expand some music repertoire with Tutti. At least Nyaguna. This is a Manjago music. It's a Manjago song. He's speaking Manjago.
They may be speaking Manjago, but the beat is definitely a Manjago. Man, I'm So,
and neo reggae, if you want to call it that. The reggae beat.
So, they are all saying thank you for the music.
Someone they can relate. So, you know, I have to say something nice about them.
Savior, oh Savior, Savior, oh Savior, Savior, oh Savior, Savior, oh Savior.
Thank you very much, folks. This is the 40 People by the People program that comes to you every Sunday on both Fat Radio and Facebook Live. The three crocodiles, well, let me just say the two crocodiles are here and one other. How would you call you? Are you a shark or a crocodile, Honorable Minister? Because I.
You cannot call the Honorable Minister crocodile or shark for that matter.
So which one does he belong? Is he a shark, or so you don't think he belongs in the shark or the crocodile?
None of that.
I thought he's But anyway, thank you so much, Mr. Jallow. And I don't think we have ever met in real, before. But I can just follow your story. I was really inspired by it, honestly. And I so want to say thank you so much. We are honored to have you here with us today to discuss the Gambia, the Constitution, and all the issues related to that. I'm sure you are familiar with this program because Mr. Jeng, anybody who comes first, he will ask you whether you will run for president. And the other question you can expect from him is he will tell you clearly, the Gambian people are not standing up for some of these things. So what do you have to say for yourself?
Why are you stealing my thunder already? I thought it was all laid out, and now I can't ask it anymore.
And look, every fuller has to be protected by a kabunka, so I'm just trying to get him prepared. But anyway, we can get started, Coach Faramos.
Yeah, well, Honorable Jallow, welcome to For the People by the People show. And I just want to also thank you because you were very responsive when I sent you a message. In fact, I saw it 2 days later. You responded right away. That was, I think, trying to get you here a week or so ago. And this is For the People by the People show. We try to discuss the issues and try to get the facts in a very civilized way. But I will start off with the Ibilabi, the draft constitution. Yes. Some people had accused you of being non-committal, lackadaisical in your response, and we are confused because they've seen you've been watched. That was prior to becoming a minister. You were on a show that was organized by Ben Suare and Day Jobate and the rest, where they saw a very enthusiastic person defending the draft. And when it was time for him to defend it for the government, it was like, well, an opinion is an opinion. There's nothing I can do about that. I don't know whether I can help you with it. So what say you? Do you think the characterization of your performance by the vast majority of those who felt that at least the bill should have been given a chance is unfair? And if it is not, why? Why not?
You see, it's difficult to judge your own performance. So I can understand for those who say they did not see either the usual Dawda or I could have been more passionate and spirited than I was on the floor of the National Assembly. However, probably certain factors played into me that we all saw on that day, because knowing what I knew at the time, it was clear to me that the die was cast. So I wouldn't know whether that was what dampened my spirit, but I tried to do my own lobbying behind the scene that many people watching the video wouldn't have seen. And I was told in my face, Honorable Minister, you're wasting your time. We are going to vote this bill out. So if that contributed to my mood, that's something else. But putting my mood aside, I tried to offer very good explanations in my view to the questions that there is, those who watch the video carefully. Whether I should have been more spirited, much more passionate about it, for me, that's something else. But I offered the explanations to the questions that they asked. And I did pleaded with them that more explanation can be given to you if you allow the bill to go to the next stage, where the commission members could be invited who actually did the consultations, who actually understood the provisions inside out, and you will have a second bite on the cherry. So when it comes back, you still reserve the same right of either approving or rejecting, but don't disapprove it at this stage. Allow us to go to the next stage. Then if you are not happy what happens at that stage, you will still have an opportunity of rejecting it if you want to reject it, if you're minded to reject it at that point. But it looks like that invitation too was not heeded. So I said earlier in previous interviews, I would respect the opinion of those who think I could have been much more spirited. But I think in terms of performance, I responded to the questions, the key questions that they asked.
Now, in all honesty, Mr. Minister, Honorable Minister, do you believe that your cabinet, because you are not there representing yourself, you are there representing the president and his cabinet, wanted the draft to pass?
You see, my position is funny. Since I took office, cabinet did not meet until I had to go to table this constitution. Wow. I found a cabinet paper that was done already and communicated to the CRC through my predecessor. So cabinet's feeling, I don't know, because we have not met as a cabinet to discuss this draft constitution during the short period that I was in office until I went to the National Assembly. I only read the cabinet position paper on the initial draft. So whatever I'm going to say, that will be my impression of talking to various cabinet ministers, my colleagues. But cabinet as an entity have not met during the time I've been in office until I went to parliament. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what is the feeling of cabinet as an entity before going to table the bill, because we've not met.
All right, Musa.
Yeah, Mr. Jallow, thanks again for joining us on the For the People, by the People. I'm still going to press on that same vein where Pasamba was going with that question. And if you can just allow me to kind of tell you what the narrative is out there, at least the way I see it. They're basically saying for 22 years, the Gambian people, they have suffered. They have lined up to vote against tyranny and give ourselves a chance. Come 2016, we were able to bring an end to tyranny. Just follow me with the narrative now, Honorable Minister. And then your predecessor, for, I could say 7, 8, 9 months, he was gallivanting from one capital to another, to the EU, raising funds, trying to do what needs to be done to make this change meaningful. The transitional justice was one thing that everybody was saying, wow, whatever we feel about this government, that is one area that they're doing a good job. Mr. Minister, they're saying that the button was hand over to you, and then you drop the button. It's not just a question of not being passionate. The UDP leader, this is the way he characterized it. Call it an indictment. He's saying that there was no passion. There was no credibility. It wasn't like someone taking a bill to the National Assembly, trying to tell them that this is the way to go, because that's how the Gambian people feel. That's what the narrative is. It's not just a question of even passion, believed in it. Is it that something you glean from the executive, or is it just something that you don't believe in? All we are saying is we felt that you disappointed us, Honorable Minister. What say you?
Well, I only respect it. It's your opinion. I got equally, you're giving me one side of the narrative. There is another narrative that are saying you did what you could do under the circumstances. So this is a democracy. I have no qualms about you feeling disappointed, but others also who are respectable figures equally in society said you did well, and that's normal. Whatever performance you put up, somebody will still object to your performance and give an opinion about it. For me, I think, what do we do moving forward? But we can stay here for the next 1 hour evaluating my National Assembly performance, and it's a matter of opinion versus another opinion.
All right, Honorable Minister, fair game. Do you believe in your heart of heart that the draft constitution as it is something worth passing? Do you believe that?
My belief is any draft constitution at this stage of our transitional justice is better than the 1997 constitution. Any that will come out. But it is very difficult for us to agree on any constitution as it is, because we will all have to, can all pick 1 or 2 things that we are not happy about in the draft. And as a Gambian, yes, I may have 1 or 2 things that I don't like, but I believe any constitution under the current circumstances passing is better than the 1997 Constitution.
Okay, you're talking about let's look forward. I mean, Honorable Minister, there are two options out there that people are floating around. They're saying, let's basically pick up the 1997 Constitution and make some amendments. That's one option. Others are saying, why don't we take the draft as it is, and try to see where the compromise is? What would you suggest that is the best way to go?
Like I just said, the 1997 Constitution, no amount of amendment under the current circumstances will make it suitable to take care of our transitional justice system as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are certain provisions in the 1997 Constitution as it is, you would not be able to amend them using a National Assembly. Mm-hmm. You will have to go to a proper referendum to get rid of some of those provisions. So instead of taking the 1997 Constitution to a referendum, why don't we look at the draft and try to reach a compromise over it, get the required political consensus around it, and retable it? So that is my first option, and that is what I am working on now.
Thank you very much, sir. Banka.
Yes, again, thank you so much for joining us, Minister Jallow. As a Kabunka, you obviously are not going to expect any much sympathy from me. We got to go at it. Just good old way.
We then can go back to Kansala then.
Exactly. That's the whole spirit. Now, Mr. Jallow, and Musa alluded to this as far as the mood of the country and how people really feel pretty much betrayed by, for instance, your performance in Parliament on that day. Now, your response to that what basically was that, hey, I did what I did, I said what I said, we can focus on that right now, or we can look to the future. I mean, that was your response. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, really? This guy is that's crazy. But now, tell me this. At the end of the day, after having watched your performance, and I will really delve into some of them key portions of it, and I was like, whoa, this guy is either in on the deal to sabotage this deal, or he just something went wrong. I don't know what it was, so I don't want to offer explanation for that, but something went wrong. But coming back to my question, why should we trust that any more future work on this constitution thing and the transitional justice process handled by you after having watched your performance in Parliament on that day should be of a source of comfort for us? I mean, give us a reason, assure us in any way that we should not just focus on what happened in Parliament that day. We should move past it, because it'd be easier to do that if you had performed well and just parliamentarians were the ones who didn't respond in kind and do the right thing. But it's a whole totally different matter if we are looking at each other like, oh, really? So you want us to trust you that you, after having watched what you did, you were gonna, this process will come out of just okay eventually? What assurances can we have from you today?
Before I give you any assurance, an analogy of what you have just said appears that those who hold the opinion that I did not do well in the National Assembly are of the belief that the failure of the bill is entirely due to that low performance. And I would say no to that. If you would want to look at why this bill failed, there are too many reasons, more than just an AG not being spirited on the floor of the National Assembly. Probably people don't know what I knew at the time. I can assure you what I knew for those 2 days debate. Bring any AG who is as spirited as you would want, that bill would not have gone. They told me in my face. That's why I don't want to offer any excuse. Probably, like I said, for those who think my spirit was dampened, maybe that would be the reason. But people don't see that on the screen. It is the AG that is answering the question that was visible to people. However, whatever people say about that, that's something else. What I know is we are going to walk through reviving the bill. We are getting a lot of support. We are mobilizing, but government is not going to lead that process. Okay? For the purpose of exactly for the reason that you said, because some people believe there is the blame that goes to government separately and there's a blame that comes to me separately. Whichever way you look at it, I don't think government can lead the consensus building process that we are trying to reach now. So the approach is this. We intend to have an independent minded, either Gambian or non-Gambian, 1, 2, or 3, whoever they are, we're still trying to pave the way forward. And then these people can bring the stakeholders together. Remember, this is not as simple as a simple government bill, like a bill that I take to National Assembly on daily basis. It's more complicated than that. This is a highly political document. This is a national constitution. So you don't expect me to treat it like an ordinary bill that I took to the House. Or some people say if I go to court, I am moving a motion, I'm expected to speak to the motion and argue spiritedly with respect of the motion. I see the distinction here. You need to wear the suit I was wearing on that day to know how it feels to move a constitution. So it's a highly... It's not about trusting Mr. Jallow now. It's about having the people that we can trust that can lead that process to assist us reach that consensus. And then we expect that by the time we reach that consensus, the required political buy-ins would have been achieved. So when it goes to the National Assembly next time, if the concerns have been taken on board, we don't expect it to face this kind of challenge that it has faced already.
No, but here's the issue here. The umpire, or what I will call the manager of the team, is the one in charge of this process at the end of the day. Let me forget about the umpire. I'm talking about the manager of the team. Is the one in charge of this process. Now, he sets up a process, and the moment whatever the direction is doesn't align with or is in conflict with his political interests, then the matter should be dead. That's what Gambians saw. And so the same managers are saying, but guys, there was nothing we could do about this. Those guys who acted the way they did, because I see you as part, you were there, the voice of the executive. You were there to represent the executive. That bill was your bill. That was your baby. You are supposed to come there and make deals anyhow you can, speak passionately about it, reach out the aisle and try to make on that stage, that platform, that was your performance stage, right there. And you were right in front of the whole nation, well, the whole world, let me put it that way. And we were at least I was expecting you will come there and make your case. Yeah, you knew something that we didn't know. We also suspected something. Trust me, these guys that you see here, we made our phone calls to players over there, and we are not happy with what we heard. Now, but for you though, you were on a whole different zone because you are the man in charge. You are the drum major. You are supposed to go there and stand on that stage and say, guys, yes, I know a lot of you are not crazy about this bill for whatever reason, but this is what we need to do, because you are also performing not for those guys, also for the country. Let the whole country make a case to the country, so that at the end of the day, those parliamentarians who are at the end of the day politicians will know that the whole Gambia has been told the real truth about what this bill represents by the man who is in charge of it, who owns it. Now, but if that man comes there, well, I'm not here to convince. I'm only here to offer explanation. So it's up to where I can. So, but it's up to you guys to decide whether you are going to do it or not. Well, by the way, the guy from Jallow, the MP from Jallow, I heard what you said. You know, what you said made it's a very pertinent issue. But in other words, we always saw was a guy giving ammunition to those who want to bring this bill down. And you knew it, that these guys were up to no good. They were going to bring this thing down. You are not there to really just concede a space to them. You are there to say, guys, I know, I heard you. Yes, this bill is not perfect. It has issues. But by all means, let's make sure we take it to the next. But you never did that. You just basically conceded.
It wasn't said the way you wanted it said, but it was said.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll let you come in. Go ahead. But why didn't you do that? Why didn't you make a case for the Gambian people so that the politicians know that, yes, you can do whatever you want around here, but when you go face those voters, you better make sure you get your story right, because they will have seen you for who you are, that you are the one who tried to bring this bill down for whatever your interests that is. And because the executive who owns this bill is the very executive that literally brought it down. Tell us how can we trust that same executive and the owners of the bill will now reconstitute these whatever credible folks that are maybe I guess more credible than our Sabalis and the Jallows to really guide this process. Help us here.
You see, you're telling me things that I'm not involved in. Are you telling me things that you say you know that I don't know? You need to realize at what time did I take office. Okay? And the opinions over this draft was already made at the time I took over office. All right? When I was taking over office, this constitutional issue was one of the issues that was handed over to me. How was it handed over to me? You did not know. So I inherited a problem over the constitution already, a serious one. I couldn't fix it. And if people expected magic from me, I'm sorry. I couldn't fix it. I tabled it. I answered the questions of the MPs over the issue of plagiarism. I answered their questions with respect to gay marriage. I answered their questions. I clarified to them. I answered their questions with respect to the discrepancy with the treatment accorded to the judiciary, because these are the salient issues they anchored their objections over. And all of these concepts, I explained it to them clearly. Of course, if I told them that it is left to them, it is a National Assembly. It's an independent arm of government. They were in possession of this bill for 3 months. They are expected to read and consult and understand the bill. Their decision is independent of the executive. This is democracy.
Yeah, can I? Okay, Banka, you done with your question?
Yes. I'll come to the next issue later on. Yeah.
All right. So now, Honorable Minister, what it is now. You said that you guys are trying to reconstitute to bring this thing. So moving forward, the transitional justice system that you inherited is central in everything to do. And the reason for it is because of the 22 years of brutal dictatorship that we're in. Most Gambians, including myself, are very skeptical of the government vis-a-vis its dealings with Jammeh and the AFPRC or APRC. Your predecessor had indicated during the last legal year that if Yahya Jammeh were to set foot in the country, that he will be arrested and prosecuted for the crime that he has committed. Most victims and victims advocates are waiting to hear what your opinion is about this matter. Where do you stand as it regards Jammeh and the crimes that he has been accused of committing against Gambians?
You see, I'm holding a public office. It's not about my opinion. If my predecessor said that at that time, I believe he was saying the position of the Gambia government. That is a government policy position. And that position have not changed as far as I'm aware. So that remains. Because I believe my predecessor was not speaking on his own. He was expressing the position of the Gambia government policy on that matter. And since I took office to now, that position have not changed as far as I'm aware.
Well, thank you very much. That's very clear. And the other issue that I would bring up is kind of a little bit of the IEC.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you've read the article. I authored an article on this matter. The chairman of the IEC has argued, and I know you must have read this on Standard, when he argued that his term expires in 2023. And I believe...
I have not seen that article.
All right. Some of us believe that that is not the case, that his term, in fact, actually ended in 2018 by virtue of the fact that he was first appointed in 2006. He resigned in 2007, that dealt with one term, and he was reappointed again in 2011 and was promoted as chairman in 2016. But according to the Constitution, Section 42, subsection 4, if I remember very well, you're supposed to have one term of 7 renewable ones. So the term should have expired on the in 2018. Will your ministry look at this matter based on the constitutionality and advise the president accordingly so that at least we'll have an IEC that is constitutionally constituted.
Of course, now that you are bringing it to my attention, formally, the matter has not been brought to our attention. As a ministry, usually advices are sought, or if an issue becomes a matter of public discourse, then we can look at it on our own. I'm not aware of any communication to the office regarding the legality of the chairpersonship of the Independent Electoral Commission. But now, if it is raised as a public discourse, of course, yes. As a ministry and the legal advisor to government, we can look at that. We need to look at the facts, because the law is applicable to the facts. So we have to look at those dates that you made reference to, when he was appointed, the resignation, reappointment. Once we get all those facts, of course, we should be able to provide an opinion about it.
Thank you. Musa.
Yeah, Honorable Minister, I don't want to sound like we're beating a dead horse, but you did indicate in your answer to Banker, you said that you were handed over a problem. The draft constitution was already a problem. And here you are the Minister of Justice. And the feedback that you were getting from, I guess you meant either the National Assembly members or the ministers or whoever you were consulting with, you knew most likely this thing wasn't going to pass. What are the other options, knowing what we know, that this is really important and critical, and this is really an important bill, knowing what you know, that most likely it wasn't going to pass? Instead of going along, what are the other options that you could have pursued? Let's say, you know what, I don't want to waste our time. Let me bring the principles together. Was that really even possible? Or even reach out to the commissioners? What say you? Or am I just really understand the process?
What I banked on more was to have, to attempt, if you want to call it horse trading or a trade-off at consideration stage. Because we already knew there are concerns and different camps are already there. So we were more or less relying on, after the second reading at committee stage, if it is possible. In fact, we, as a ministry, we looked into the possibility, because there were even arguments to say National Assembly itself could not even amend the constitution. That is a whole camp that is saying they should not even touch it. They must pass it as it is. But we were willing to see if it means we accommodate some form of little adjustments, because it is clear that not everybody can get what you want in the national constitution. If there was going to be any possibility of trading off a little bit at committee stage, we were willing to look at that, because there is no law that prohibits that. It is a bill, so they could do some amendments to some extent. And at that stage, the commissioners would have been present to see. They could not edit on their own, but the powers of the National Assembly could have been invoked for them to make some adjustments so that we agree on something and then it get passed. The issue of what could have been done at the time this bill was gazetted, people were in a haste to see it tabled. At that material moment, if you delay tabling to the National Assembly, that would have brought another big debate in the country. And the state would have been, people would have been much more, even more suspicious. Why are they even delaying the tabling of the thing? So I don't think it would have been wise, after the required number of gazetting period was completed, for it to be withdrawn. One honorable member asked during the adjournment debate and said, in hindsight, should we have had a national dialogue over the draft before the tabling? But the answer is, I couldn't do much about it. I found the bill was gazetted and the gazette period was completed. The next thing I can do is just to have it in the National Assembly. So whether or not there should have been a much better approach to the bill before it's been tabled, that is history now. But as an individual, there was very little I could do about that, because I found the bill was already gazetted.
Mr. Minister, there is this other, when you listen to either the National Assembly members or even some of the folks that we spoke to, trying to lobby them, they kind of level some kind of, I don't want to say accusation, to the commissioners. I mean, did you hear the same thing, that somehow the commissioners themselves dropped the ball, that there was something that they could have done to make it much easier to pass? I mean, what say you to this idea of maybe the commissioners did something wrong, or they were maybe too political, maybe they were too... Did you hear anything like that?
We had everything. But like I said, those opinions for me are opinions. Whatever you do in this country, people will form opinion about you. The commissioners are respectable people. They did a job. All right. We had an opportunity of having them at the next stage for them to participate in the proceedings. They were not allowed to come at that stage because the standing orders are drafted in such a way that only the AG could have been had at that stage. So the commissioners could have come at the consideration stage for explanation. They never allowed that we ought to reach at that level. So whatever you level against the commissioners, to me, that's a matter of opinion. People can say, well, like we started the program by trying to look at what they level against me. So many people are also saying a lot of things against the commissioners. I would not buy into those kind of arguments. I think people form opinions about almost everything that you do.
Banka, just last question here.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Honorable Minister, you talk about either bringing in an independent task force to basically bring together all the stakeholders to look at what the compromise is. Now, obviously, looking at it from your vantage point, what are the points out there, the issues out there that you believe that can be compromised upon to facilitate the passing of this bill? What are the principal issues in the current draft that you think they are the sticking points?
I don't want to preempt the process.
I ain't talking about preempting. I mean,
no.
You
see, I'm as the minister, if I speak, it's like I speak for government. And I'm not supposed to say this and this and this, trying to point out certain clauses in the constitution and say, whoever is going to come and lead this process, make sure you are mindful of A, B, C, D. I don't want to do that. I want to give out the responsibility and allow them to do their job without me having to interfere with what they're doing.
All right, Banga. Go ahead.
Now, Honorable Jallow, let's go back to the issue again. You are being in charge of this process. Now, constitutionally, you have to. We don't even have a choice. At the end of the day, the executive has to be the one who works on these things and then bring it to the parliament and stuff. Now, the main issue here is that the chief driver, the executive, is the one that is sabotaging the process because it doesn't align with the executives, or let me just say it's in conflict, or whatever it comes out, it's most likely going to be in conflict with the executive's desires and political interests. Why? Because the executive's political interests are in conflict with the national aspirations of the Gambian people, unfortunately. Now, you can disagree with this point, and I get that. Unfortunately for you, I don't envy your position. You are an employee of that executive. You see the kind of untenable situation you are in. Now, you are here telling us... sorry?
I say it's good you acknowledge that. Let's move on.
No, absolutely. No, I don't want to tie a noose to your neck on these issues because I see where your limitations are. But that brings me to my main point, my main question. Here you are. You know what you know. Don't say it because it might put you in trouble. Because your boss is the guy who sabotaged this bill. I don't care what anybody else says. Now, do you have sort of like a game plan in place to find a way to get to the powers that be, and then in a way to kind of harmonize whatever political interest they have with the national aspirations in a fashion that can yield us the result that we want to have? Do you think you have that ability? You think it's in your power, or you have some tools in your toolbox that you can use? Because I'm sorry, but you are in a very difficult situation. This is not like just parliamentarians are against this bill. That's not the issue here. Those parliamentarians outside of APRC, everybody else is doing it because of instructions from the executive side. We know it's a small country, but here you are. Tell us, how do we proceed from here? What do you think? Can we trust you with that process that you'll be able to pull this off?
I think this is a repeat question. I said it earlier, clearly. It's not about the trust you have in me. We want the process to be led by people we can trust, not me. All right? Our role here as a ministry is to facilitate, probably raise the necessary funding and logistics to support the process. This will be led by people that can be trusted, and their objective is to get the necessary consensus around the document. The document failed because there was no consensus around it. If they can help us reach a consensus, it's a political process. We cannot divorce politics from this. Okay? It is a political process. The parliament, a lot of politics goes on in parliament. So we need to get them on board. We need to find a way. How we do this, all of you as Gambians are invited to send in suggestions. We're still working it out, but we want to come up with a method that by the time that our process concludes, we will believe that we have got the minimum political support that when we take it to the House, it will pass. So it's not about me, it's not about the Ministry of Justice anymore.
Right. But now that we are pressed for time, you know, notice that we are in big trouble now with this constitution thing. Because, you know, at the end of the day, it's a political process, but it's also a constitutional process. You are a legally minded individual. You understand that you cannot just come, you do this anyhow you want to and say, okay, that's it. There is a process that is stipulated out there in the constitution, and unless we want to flout that and say, you know what, go to hell with the constitution and do our own thing, we have to follow those rules. Now, seeing what we have seen now, with the elections being just barely a year away, and we want the coming elections to be guided at least by this new draft, because 1997 Constitution, as you already articulated so well here, is really a no-brainer. I mean, we don't want it to rule over us for one more day, let alone have our elections trusted with its processes stipulated in it. Do you think we have the time for this? Because we may not even, time is not there, Mr. Jallow. And if I keep coming back to the same issue and pounding on it, is because that's to really give you a sign as to the need and the urgency and the importance of this matter right here, where I am trying to zero in on.
Yes, the timeline we are working on, we are pressed for time, but it is possible. We're working towards having this process completed, if not before end of November, but somewhere around that. So if we're able to get everything done and we got a document that we can gazette, say end of November or December, we can meet the 3 months gazette period you are trying to refer to in the Constitution, which is a requirement, at least by March. And by March, if we table it in the National Assembly by March, if we're lucky it got passed, we can still have the referendum in time before the elections. This is still possible. Tight, but it is possible.
Okay. Now, one more question. I want to tie it to the transitional justice process quickly. And then
Go ahead.
Now, this constitution here, tell us what are the implications? Because I know a lot of people will say the constitution and the constitution and not really realize how this one here, this draft itself, is tied to the whole entire transitional process. Okay. Explain to us, how are they related? What does this constitution really have to do, say, with the TRRC and whatever the report comes out and, you know, all that? How?
This is it. The 1997 Constitution contains very strong immunity clauses for people, probably, if the TRRC should recommend prosecution, and that is people who bear the greatest responsibility for violation of human rights. They may rely on certain immunity provisions in the 1997 Constitution. And almost all of those immunity provisions are entrenched. Okay? The only way you can remove them is you go to referendum or completely repeal the 1997 Constitution. So to some extent, that's why I at the beginning I said, no matter how diluted the Constitution might be, no matter how we might try to adjust to reach a compromise, so long as it will enable us to repeal the 1997 Constitution, it is still better. It will still do a good job, because if you remove the 1997 constitution, it goes along with all the protection that it is according to some people. So this is the implication that people are trying to look at. The transitional justice program, mainly the TRRC, if it concludes and recommends for prosecution of people that bear the greatest responsibility of human rights violation, it will be very difficult. But it's a matter of delay. But it will be very, very difficult, and it will be time consuming to get rid of all the stumbling blocks that are contained in the 1997 constitution. Basically, the biggest threat the 1997 constitution poses to the transitional justice program is mainly the TRRC.
That's the area it mainly affects, not the...
Yes, it could affect other things like the security sector reform and other things. But you can walk around that, but it will significantly delay the TRRC full implementation of the TRRC recommendations.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I just wanted to just clarify case on there about the thing, because I think some immunities just maybe for the force from 1994 to 1996 AFPRC, and of course the April 10th 11 immunity. That there was the indemnity bill. Am I right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So if Jammeh thinks that he can get away with all the crimes that he committed after that, not so fast. But the other issue that I have is, are we still on the state of public emergency?
No. There is no state of public emergency on.
So the Gambia, everybody is now free to move about, do whatever you want to do. No prosecution for people not wearing masks or anything.
Regulations governing wearing of masks is still on. That is under the Public Health Act.
How about social distancing?
Still under the Public Health Act, yes.
So if I were to go now and organize a gathering of so many people, can the police prosecute me, arrest me, and your ministry or the police decide to prosecute me? Will they be on legal legs to do that?
Yes, they should be able to do that under the public health regulations.
So would it be fair to say that the very government, your government, I know you know where I'm heading to with this, is flouting the very rules, the very regulations that it put in place by organizing all these meetings that we've seen over time, where you have crowds, there was no social distancing, no mask wearing, and then you're turning around telling people not to go to Magal. So is it fair to say that the government, the executive, is complicating the work of not only the law enforcement officers, but your office too, by their recent behaviors?
Agreed, yes. If the gatherings are organized in contravention of the regulations, of course, yes.
Yeah, they did. Okay. The next question that I have here is, if there was one thing that we celebrated about your predecessor, was that he was the most, of course, controversial. A lot of people had controversies that they bring up on all this stuff, but he was the most apolitical AG that we've ever had. On the Jawara, they were political, they were rallies, they were everywhere. On the Jammeh, of course, that was the order of the day.
You're saying that on behalf of who?
That we've observed.
Okay.
Because I have evidence to back this.
He's not speaking for me. He's not speaking for Mr.
All right. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. So it was celebrated that he was at least apolitical. Publicly, we didn't see him in any of these political rallies and this thing. Is that something that you would want to continue as the chief law enforcement officer of our country and the chief legal advisor to our government, to at least stay apolitical, even though it is your right to be political if you want it to be?
Political rallies, I am not interested because I don't want to be involved in partisan politics.
Okay. Well, thank you. You've answered my question. That's what I was looking for. Musa.
Yeah. I'm getting some text, Honorable Minister, and that's why I'm pressing on this point again. I know you said you cannot preempt the very issues that you think could bring all the stakeholders, but based on your the reaction you were getting from the National Assembly members, executive, what are those issues that they thought that they were not very comfortable with, and most likely they will vote against it? I mean, what are those issues that you thought that you
I will leave them to bring that to the negotiation table, sir. I will leave them to bring it to the negotiation table themselves.
The reason why I'm asking, because by knowing those issues, then we may be able to talk about it, lobby people, and you know, I mean,
but
because
National Assembly members and politicians can be invited to this platform for them to tell you what they don't like about the Constitution.
Oh no, believe me, we'll do that. We always do. Everybody comes here.
Very well. So don't let me speak for them.
Except your boss. We're trying to get him, but he's not going to come. Go ahead, Musa.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, of course we would definitely want President Barrow to come to this platform. We would love to have him. But I mean, my final question. There was a lot of talk about our development partners. I mean, getting involved, trying to actually talk to the president and send a letter to the National Assembly members. And people were poo-pooing against that, saying it's interference to our sovereignty. I mean, what say you to that whole issue?
So whatever I say here, it could be linked to the position of the government. And I don't want to do that because I'm not mandated to speak for government on that matter. So,
but let me ask you though, so you don't know what the government position is in terms of our development partners? I mean, either trying
to... statement that they release on the day of the debate.
Yes.
That's what you're asking. That's a specific question, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, asking the parliamentarians to pass the bill.
Yes.
Of course, yes. I'm not the foreign minister, and like I said, we have not met as a government over that issue, so I cannot communicate government position on that press release.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jallow.
Thank you.
Yes, we promise you an hour. I think we still have 7 minutes to go before we can go. Sometimes that is Banker's preamble. Go ahead, Banker.
But I'm sure the man is enjoying this whole thing.
No, he was looking forward to 30 minutes. He has, you know me and my time thing. When they say 1 hour is 1 hour. 1 hour he's out of here so that we can get him again. So, Banker, ask your question real quick.
He is a lawyer. He knows that this cross-examination is a piece of cake. But now, Honorable Jallow, you know, back to the issue of the European Union and UK embassy, US, European Union, but anyway, the diplomatic corps that wrote a letter, during the course of this whole process. I saw that when you went to Parliament, in fact, the very first issue, when you got up to speak, the very, very first issue was the one that you addressed. I mean, it was focused on, well, by the way, let me make you call the clarification. Make a clarification here. This whole thing was financed by the Gambia government, not a single penny from any, government around the world went into it, and that's because the Gambia government wants to own the process. Those were your words. I mean, I quote you there. You said Gambia government wants to own the process. Now, why did you feel you had to make such a clarification on that issue right before you said anything at that moment? Why? I just want to get into
that has nothing to do with the press release. That was because I think there was one of the parliamentarians who said, if this bill goes to even referendum, it will fail. So before we spend the money at referendum, why don't we stop it here? And he went further to say that this one, we are lucky it is donor funded. But if we are going to go to referendum, it might be funded from our budget, and we want to save that money. So that's why when I came, I sought to clarify that. And on that point, I would want to make one clarification. That response that I gave on the floor of the House, I later realized upon further consultation that there were so many others support the process, the CRC process received more than what I acknowledged at the National Assembly. But I said that based on the consultation I did, because I was not in office when the process was on. So there was no way I could know who contributed, who did not contribute. So I inquired to prepare my answer for that before taking the floor. And the response that was given to me was the response I gave on the floor. But after that date, to be fair to our development partners, I later come to realize that so many other development partners contributed in kind or in different other ways, even though the budget came from the government of the Gambia per se. But then there were other forms of assistance that the CRC received in different forms and in many forms. that I could have acknowledged if I had known at the time.
Yeah.
But at the time I was responding at that time, that was what was given to me as an answer.
I'm glad you said that, because that's the main reason why I asked you that question, is to see whether you really realize that the narrative that the development partners did not contribute a dime, they didn't do anything. They were totally banded about to discredit that press release. But anyway,
at that level, you, as a minister, you don't speak on your own. You always have advisors, and you will ask, especially a minister that was not in office at the time all these things happened. So I did ask. I asked, how do I respond to this question? Was it funded by donors or Gambia government funded? And I got an answer from some of my technical advisors that no, it's purely Gambia government funded, except for a vehicle donated by UNDP. But I am happy to acknowledge in this open forum that was not the case. We later learned that there were many other forms of support given to CRC. And CRC itself have acknowledged it.
Huge, a lot of it, a lot of money went into it. Now, Jallow, when you were appointed, most of us were scratching our head like, who is this guy? Where is this from? Where is he from? I mean, because we don't know you. I mean, it's not like we've seen you become, like a major actor on the ground, and maybe you were doing so many things quietly and that kind of thing. But we just didn't know who you are. Tell us, where are you from? Because we heard you are from Senegal. I'm kidding. But where are you from? Yeah. Well, before I start the constitutional crisis talk here, I better back away from that. But tell us a thing or two about you, really, from the beginning to the end, all the way. Where are you from? Who are you? Where did you go to school? What did you do? Who is Dr. Jallow? Who is Dr. Jallow?
Where were you?
Where were you? Where were you?
I've been here. Maybe you were not following current events in the last decade or last 2 decades in the Gambia.
Right.
That's you can understand. So I am from West Coast region. I'm from Sifo. I did my schoolings here. I did Gambia College, HTC. I did University of the Gambia. I did University of Essex in the United Kingdom. I worked different places. I taught briefly. I worked at the National Council for Civic Education. I worked as magistrate and resigned as principal magistrate. I worked at the Ministry of Finance, and I then resigned from government. I went to private practice until this appointment came.
Oh, okay.
Well, I hope you are not an Arsenal fan.
He is.
I am.
You are sad. You know what? You
know,
see, everybody saw me smiling for a minute because, Man, you got a whooping today, but Liverpool is getting one of their own, 4-1 already against Aston Villa, which is sadder than anything.
Anyway, we won our game yesterday. So those who want to talk can talk.
Dude, you played today. You don't even know when you played. You played today. But anyway,
you are now just like this.
You know what, Mr. Jallow, we really want to thank you so very much for honoring our invitation. It was not difficult to have you, definitely. Yeah. And there is a platform. We'll be reaching out to you some more. And the question that we asked, especially from this guy in blue with the big glasses, is always the devil's advocate. What people want to know. So, but we thank you so very much for this opportunity, and we look forward to engaging with you.
Thank you.
And hopefully, we've not even had a chance to get to the diaspora voting and all that this validation thing. But time, we'll deal with that another time. We'll bring you here again.
No problem. Thank you very much.
And we thank you so very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Jallow. We appreciate you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so guys, do not go anywhere. Like Banka would say, we have Dr. Saine coming up in a few minutes, and then we'll deal with the issue.
Yeah, we got I think it's coming at 3:30.
3:30. Yeah. So we can delve into some other issues that are going on. But I think well, it was a great interview. You could not just cover all the angles because of time,
Right.
but we'll bring him here
Right.
and thank him again for at least according us this opportunity. And those
Well,
people
definitely.
that we've tried to bring here and they get scared to death, this is what we do. We bring you here,
Yes.
we challenge you on the issues. We don't bite, we don't insult, we don't do anything, and then you go. But anyway,
And I think to some extent he answered some of the question, but some of it to hide behind, I don't want to preempt. But, generally, I think
he's a lawyer.
he did relatively well. Yeah, really.
Yeah, he generally did well because, to be honest, one thing that surprised me, I have to say this, was that he seems to have made it crystal clear that he is not anybody's boy, that he has his independent mind on so many levels. Because I honestly thought that the way this guy behaved in Parliament, that I was like, oh boy, here we go again. Another one that's going to just be rolled over and asked to do A, B, C, D, and he will just go ahead and do it. But I think he can be excused for, the shock.
I don't know about that.
I know. When I saw you adjust your eye, almost.
I don't know about that.
Let me finish, and then I will give you a chance for the ball. What I'm saying is, I guess what I was thinking, or the way I was looking at him after that performance in Parliament, was much, much lower than what I'm. Because to be honest, I was like, okay, that's it, we are done. This guy here was brought in to do Barrow's bidding and push by Barrow's agenda. He is not going to be the Attorney General that he needs to be. Because that was a very, very poor performance. He did just poorly, and I mean horrible. But again, you have a different take on it.
Horrible.
No, what I'm saying is, you're basically saying that based on this interview and the way he responded, even though you thought he was going to be boy or whatever you want to call it, I wouldn't say boy. Taking the position of the executive, I don't think there's anything in his answers that said he's not. I really haven't heard it. What did he say?
I will tell you. Are you asking me that? I will tell you.
He didn't want to get into that's why I asked about the specific issues, to kind of know what his positions are or what he's basically looking at. But again, what I'm saying is there's nothing so far based on this interview for me to feel like, you know what, this guy is his own man. Here is the guy that we're thinking. Again, and I can't help myself comparing it with Bar, because I know that Bar believed in this. Now, whether Bar was going to be successful or not, he would have fought for it at the National Assembly. He would have pushed the envelope. The guy hasn't done that, and even based on this interview, there's nothing that he has said. He assured me to reassure us that he's his own man. Now, the good thing though, that he doesn't think a whole lot. He doesn't think much of the 1997 Constitution and zeroing on this draft and trying to find common ground. That's a good start. But again,
the reason why I'm saying that is this. When Coach and asked him a pointed question about an issue that we all know where Coach was going with him, he didn't mince his words. He said, "What? Mama, I'll show you. Open your mouth, madam."
Go ahead.
Exactly. So the fact of the matter is, his response to Coach tells me, okay, maybe there is much more to this guy. And the other issue is the parliamentarians who voted against this bill. This guy didn't come here and mince his words. He basically was saying, look, you all saw for yourself what you saw for yourself. These guys were not, they had already made up their minds. There was nothing I could go there and tell them that was going to change their votes. They were already up to no good already. So in essence, if he were playing along, because to be honest, I thought he was in on the deal. And I told him as much. I thought this guy was prepped up. He was given a script. He came there to just kind of, especially with the answers he was giving, how he was giving them, that he was just playing along. But that he was literally there to participate in this national disaster. But what I'm hearing from him, he does seem like, let me just say, I will give him the benefit of the doubt for a little bit longer. I will, instead of really jumping right
No,
off.
this is
go back to the question that coach asked him. Sorry, coach. The pointed question had something to do with the, I guess, the Bar's position as far as
about Jammeh. Yes,
right. That's the one you're alluding to. But what did he say? He said he hasn't heard anything that the position of the government has changed.
I'm not talking about that one.
Okay, here is what I have to say about the performance banker. About the performance. This is what I believe.
Emergency, you know the rules. Sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
No, but the rules, it would have been very difficult for him to say other. But this is what I have to say about.
We have to spin these things, but anyway.
Yeah. No, this is what I believe. If I were the AG, the Attorney General of the Gambia, and I believe in anything, I don't care what anybody says to my face.
Exactly.
I will go there and make a very direct and complete argument.
I'll make
that even if they vote against it, everybody would have known. But coach can get away fide. And this was what was happening. And the reason why people have a problem with this, we saw the government's position on this draft. They were not crazy about it. And to them, and the sad thing about it, to them, it was only about two things: Barrow's terms, Barrow's powers. Nothing else. It was not about what the Christians' the problem they had, those that have concerns about gay. That was not their issue. It was one issue only. All right? Man, I would have made that argument and listen. The whole transitional justice system, the whole essence of why this change was here, this whole agenda of this government rests on this. Because Barrow's whole agenda is the transitional justice system. Everything else is secondary. Okay.
The guy. Look, this guy is a lawyer. Sometimes you represent.
Baka, can you please? I think Sehu Sedili is trying to call you because when he called, he took me off.
Go to the courts.
Sehu Sedili, can you respond back to him? Yeah.
Yeah, I will. They are all calling them, but Sehu Sedili, everybody's calling. I think they all want to take a bite at this. Okay, Sehu, you hold on. Let's have them, but we have to limit your times, guys.
Yeah, because we have Dr. Saine coming in about a few minutes. So
Demba, you go ahead and then say we'll be on standby. I will have you right after when Demba is done. Demba, go ahead.
Anyway.
Demba,
I am so disappointed with you guys, man. I mean, what did you cannot get this guy? Huh?
Demba, go ahead. We cannot hear you.
Can hear me?
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
I am so disappointed with you guys, man. You guys are three of you, Banka Mane, Pasamba Jau, Musa Jeng. I mean, the Attorney General is sitting there. You guys are just giving him leading questions.
Deba, what did, in all honesty, what did you expect us to do? We ask questions and he answers them.
No,
we cannot force him to say anything that he doesn't want to say.
That's all right. Deba, you tell us, what questions would you have asked the man? Go ahead.
Did you guys read my post?
No, we did not read it.
You guys are on the show.
No, we did not read your question.
No, we did not read that.
Why don't you tell us what questions were you going to ask the guy? Go ahead.
I mean, the guy was just was I did something. I joined late, maybe. I mean, perhaps. I'm just teasing you guys, though. But I mean, I wanted, I mean, the guy was just stopping all the questions on their track. I mean, he was not even dwelling on it.
But what can we do?
But you see, Demba, you as a journalist, you would appreciate that if we bring a person here, what we cannot do too, we are not bringing a guest to debate him.
Exactly.
We are bringing a guest to ask him questions, and we cannot force him to say anything that he didn't want to say. At the end of the day, we believe that our listeners, including yourself and everybody else, is smart enough to listen and say, you know what, he dodged that question, or he did not answer that question, or he was not factual about that other question.
So I mean, maybe I missed this, but I wanted to know about his judicial philosophy, right? I mean, we have so many cases that are right now that are in tracks, apart from just the constitutional, the draft constitution. There's so many cases that you guys hear me? It looks like
No, we can hear
Yeah,
you.
we can hear you.
The way I look at it is, the way I look at it personally is, when it comes to judicial philosophy, you ask a judge is the one you ask such a question, because a judge is he's the referee, is the one who is going to really be the arbitrator of these cases. So you ask a judge, what is your judicial philosophy? But an attorney, a lawyer,
no.
I don't know. I mean, maybe.
No, but Demba,
Yeah,
Demba, to answer that query.
One minute, don't let Demba make case.
No, dama buga answer that query bu make about judicial philosophy.
Let
The
me make
reason. Okay.
Go ahead, Demba.
let me make my, what I was trying to say is that, for example, I was actually getting at, not only the draft constitution, but so many other challenges, in terms of, the justice system that we're going through right now in the Gambia. That this guy is faced with, he inherited, right? For example, the ANI, for example, the Jami mission, the messed up they did with the Jami assets. For example, the, what do you call it? These guys are, the mingling of the justice minister and the attorney general's role, the conflict between these two. You being the attorney general, and also you being, the minister of justice. And also, I mean, you guys saw one of the reasons why this guy was not talking was not defending the draft constitution in parliament, because that's not his baby. Bata Medu, who Musa Jeng is been defending, was the one who really came up with this bill, and then he abandoned the bill in midstream, and then in limbo. This guy he does not know about that bill. I'm not defending him.
Yeah, but bank, Demba, can I respond to some of the issues that you raised? Yes, if you look at the whole judiciary, there are a plethora of issues that can be asked. And this is why when we agreed with the guy to come, he first thought it was going to be 30 minutes. We had him for an hour. And we were able to ask questions that we could fit there. If we had this guy for a whole program, and even with that, you could have missed some question. That doesn't mean that we let him go free or whatever. And chances are, even if he was here, you could have asked him that, and he would tell you, what did he say about the Constitution? That we never had a cabinet meeting. And I'm still reviewing these things. At the end of the day, the questions that we felt were right now relevant to be asked. That doesn't mean that others were not relevant. Were asked. Maybe if we had more time, we could have delved into other issues. And when it comes to the opinion about being the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, that is a constitutional matter. Unless you have a new constitution that changes that, there is nothing that he can do about it. Because that is something that is in the 1997 constitution.
They did not have a cabinet meeting. It was not true that they did not have a cabinet meeting.
Well,
even if she was not there, the cabinet had a meeting.
But you know what, Demba, if we had the chance to fact check him, maybe we could have gone as he went. But at the end of the day, I believe blaming us for having an interview where we asked questions that we felt were relevant, I think is absolutely unfair.
Demba, because that's why I wanted us to give Demba the opportunity to make his case. And personally, I don't think Demba has really said anything. Demba is saying, well, you guys should have asked about the Jane Commission, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, or he's talking about Batambedu dumping these things. This was his baby. Come on. What has that got to do with anything, Demba? I thought we asked.
He couldn't defend it in Parliament. He couldn't defend it in Parliament because he didn't know much about it.
He was defending Demba. This guy was always on TV here, on online radios defending the draft. Come on now.
The guy, look. There is always, when it comes to government, there is always. If I were the justice minister, whether it's my baby or not, this guy was handpicked to be justice minister. It becomes his responsibility. He's the one who walked into the National Assembly. Passion wasn't there. The guy did not defend
a horrible performance that he put
the government was not interested in defending this thing.
Listen, governance is continuity.
Demba. Mr. Jallow knew his skills from the executive was they were not interested in defending it. That's why he did not defend it. It has nothing to do with this National Assembly, I knew that this thing is fait accompli. It wasn't going to pass. Even if you know it's fait accompli, it's not going to pass, and you really want it to pass.
I want you to bring back Batambedu. Bring back Batambedu to your platform. You are alleging that now that he was going to defend it.
Oh, he would have defended it. I can assure you that.
I'm sorry for interrupting your program. I'm just putting it.
Maybe there, but you can reach out to the minister and then.
I want to hear what he's coming in to come and attack the minister. You know, he's the UDP star. He's the one who goes after everybody that comes from the
movement. You come to my platform. Don't worry about it. I'll let you guys deal with it.
Hey, Demba, thank you so much for calling. We appreciate you, brother.
No problem.
Thank you, Demba.
Yeah.
Thank you, Demba.
Listen to Musa. Everything you said, I agree.
No, it's Seattle la deka fum neka. So they can Seattle because part of you for the negative energy.
All right, but so.
Hey, Banka.
Now, it new minister say Bata media Miss Bakele. You are telling people around town.
Yalla mengada. Huh?
Yellow, I've been telling you guys, be careful what you wish for. Now you have a cup like in your hand looking around town for buy, and buy is no better.
Okay. But anyway, I don't want to be long. How long you guys are waiting for another guest? Thank you so much. Very good show. Thank you for having the Attorney General, and also I think you're gonna have Professor Abdoulaye Saine later. I just want to contribute on one point, and I feel yesterday I had a show on Bankaba, and because I was so disappointed when I heard Dawda Jallow say on the floors of the National Assembly that Gambia government financed this CRC in its entirety, which was a lie. And it's shameful in this day and age when we have our government ministers lying to the population. This is not okay. People can just take this on a pinch of salt and say yes, oh, it's just a mistake. But these are serious things, Coach and Banka and Musa.
Callers, you guys stop calling for now, because if you are calling, you are interrupting the program big time. Yes, please,
okay.
please. No, go ahead.
It's not excuse. It's not excuse. This shows the dysfunctionality of this government in its entirety. So he relied on a single advice from somebody, and then presumably whether he got proper briefing from Batambedu, because this is the purpose of handing over notes. When a new minister comes in, you put a handing over notes, and the minister will be briefed on point by point. And CRC being a key component, then Dawda Jallow ought to know everything around CRC, financing of it. So that shows the mediocrity of this government, and that shows this guy is not up to the job. You cannot go to the National Assembly and boast and say, yes, we want to take ownership of this. Look, I said on Bantaba again, let me repeat it for those who missed it. European Union on the 19th of December 2019 gave Gambia government 22 million euros. They wired the money to the Gambia government, to the consolidated funds. Then in 2017, 77 million euros were given. And that's all for this governance structure. CRC is part of it. So that's why I challenged the Attorney General, and I said, you need to come back and then clarify this, because you lied to the population. This whole CRC was taken by the development partners, because Gambia government, we all know, Gambia government always in getting budgetary support from them. Since Gambia attained her independence, Gambia has never financed her budget on her own purposely. It's always getting budgetary support from development partners. So he's a lawyer. I know he's not an economist, he's not a finance guy, but for him to just boast and say something as an Attorney General is very shameful.
But it's very
shameful, and it's embarrassing our people. Look, let me finish, guys. I don't know whether you I don't want to, I know Demba was teaching you guys. I think you guys asked legit questions, right questions in my view. Is that he was very evasive, just like any minister in this government would be. This government, any minister that comes to the platform, they're all evasive. Ibrahim Silla was evasive when he came to the platform, and Mr. Jallow was very evasive as well. But look at what happened just a couple of days ago. Another embarrassing thing, and that I am going to fault it on the AG as well. There is a debacle at the central bank. the act. Did he advise Barrow that he doesn't have the powers to remove the central bank governor? Because he is the chief legal advisor to the president.
Yeah,
So this
that
guy
was one question we forgot to ask.
Strength, but this Dawda Jallow, I think he is too inexperienced to be Attorney General.
Yeah, just hold on.
Yeah, so in my view, he is too inexperienced for the job, and he ought to know better. You cannot just come out and make such blunders, and then just to come and say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I haven't now known the facts." These are things that he should have known. He should have known when you go to the office, take at least 2-3 weeks to go through the files properly. And if you are not sure about something, don't make a proclamation on it, particularly trying to undervalue the work of our development partners. We are a dependent nation. We are not. Yes, people talk about sovereignty, but you upset the EU guys. And look, there was a meeting last week in Brussels about this issue, and Gambia was on the agenda, particularly about this rejection of the draft constitution. There was a serious high-level meeting in Brussels about this whole issue. So this is not a small issue, particularly when Barrow refused to see the diplomats. So it's not a small thing, and Gambia is we are going to face ramifications. It's not going to happen now. You know, face sanctions now.
Quick question, Blanga Demde. Guide Unedal, 2021 dal is game over NPP because the crowd big guy is in URR. And all the
what is URR voter population? Musa, look, West Coast region has the most population, most populated.
No, I'm going 97,000 in URR. If Barrow can get 60 to 70% of 197,000, all he needs is why
are you bothering?
Even if Barrow 100% in URR,
we have 7 minutes to Dr. Saine.
Yes, we have Dembaba. Yes, bye bye. We'll till another time. Say thank you for it. Can kuma fokande but ni tala molom nun then ni say ba ko get him off the line, get him off the line.
Thank you guys, thank you for having me.
Okay,
thank you guys. But we have one more call, then Dr. Saine comes in. So that
in fact more Monica
did you send the living Dr. Saine most?
Well, we know email so work on email now.
Email, yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Kex. Hello, Kex. Kex.
Oh, by the way, Sir Kex to wish a very, very happy birthday. He turned 34 today.
Kex.
You know.
I'm hang up my call because mom Kex so while.
Happy birthday, Kex. Dobukula. He's 34. 34 day. How many years ago la won? Was came out too. Happy 60 years.
That was long time ago.
Thank you very much.
Kex, happy birthday before you start. You know, and thank you for being a wonderful guy and for everything that you continue to do for country.
Yes, definitely. I joined coach in that. Yes, definitely. So how old are you turning today? 49, 50? Like that.
Thank you very much, guys, for the compliments. I really appreciate it.
So, Kex, I heard you are 50 years old today, no?
Go, So,
but happy birthday, definitely. We are all very happy for you. You are a good guy, Kex. You are an awesome. It's okay. Any day you run for parliament, I will be there to campaign.
No win there. No win there. Don't allow him. You never support a winning candidate. But go ahead. Go ahead, Kex.
Still the last minute. So actually, thank you very much. Just to contribute to the program in regards to the minister's interview, and I have been reading the comments in regards to the minister's position or his activities come to defending the bill at the National Assembly. One has to understand what is a normal bill, this proclamation constitution bill. These are two different bills in the National Assembly, and the procedures are totally different. The minister at the National Assembly, like when he tabled that bill, he have to do is to come with an explanatory memorandum that will explain the details of the intention of the government, why they tabled this bill before the National Assembly. And convince each and every patriotic Gambian National Assembly member to say, yes, I should vote for this bill, or no, I should not vote for this. That explanatory memorandum should convince each and everyone. That is the only document that the minister.
Hello?
Yeah, we did talk.
Yes.
I don't remember everything that we talked about.
Okay, Musa, they had him up the line and be mute because mom, I don't think he knows that his line is coming through. Kex. Okay, I think Kex's line is gone.
Yeah,
okay.
He's in the Gambia.
Yeah, no. And you know, Kex has the best internet in that country. I don't know whether you noticed that. He never gets any problem with his internet. Every time he has his live Facebook lives with his phone, it always is clear, crystal clear with no breaks. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah, but you know, while we are trying to get Kex, man, I just really want to appeal to this government to start being serious with the Gambian people. Back to see the crowd that have been following Barrow and how he had turned this whole thing into a political rally. And then you turn around and tell the Gambian people that you don't want them to go to the Magal for fear of COVID. That doesn't make sense. You still have your regulations in place. Why? You know, and people must understand. I have been saying this, and I'm going to continue to say it. Unless we move past, anytime you open a road, the whole country comes to a standstill. We are not moving. I'm serious. It's just horrible. And it's an insult. In fact, to me, it took away everything. How can anybody sit there and try to tell your family members that, hey, this is serious? I have a brother who wants to go to the Magal, and somebody was telling me, hey, Ba Orna. I'm like, what do you mean Ba Orna? You have the government that has not taken this damn thing seriously. Baro is there, the garu wale ninyek, wow, kunne nakala tude. Daga duro sabay, guy complain sabay sacha katla one and all these things. And it's just crazy. Wow. I see Dr. Saine was able to make it on. Wow.
Can you adjust your camera?
Let's just go to
your head.
Dr. Saine, some of them is there.
Some of them is there. Because there is room around town that people can come.
Yes. Yeah, let's go back to Dr. Saine and you tell the callers to stop.
But let me tell you guys one thing, and I have to say this because with Dr. Saine, every time you see him, he looks so much younger than his age.
He doesn't age.
Can you just do us a favor and just tell the viewers how old you are? Honestly, just go ahead and do that. Musa, I heard you. Now we can hear you, Musa. So, Doctor, tell us how old are you really?
I am almost 70.
I think Dr. Saine is the youngest old person that I've ever seen. You know, Musa.
You guys are very kind.
No, it's serious. I'm serious.
You guys are very kind.
Anybody who saw Nika Toge Musani, they would think that Musa is at least, even though Musa is very close to your age, but.
Literally,
you're old.
One time, you know, all along I thought you and I are the same age.
You guys look good too, man.
Why is good to have you again, Dr. Saine, and
I'm glad
you know
guys.
I wanna thank you for something. And maybe you don't get this a lot. You are single-handedly responsible for a lot of camaraderie that happens in the struggle, apart from Jammeh's craziness. Because of your idea of Save the Gambia Fund,
that's true.
An entity was born, Save the Gambia Democracy Project.
Correct.
Through which NAD was born. And from there, Unfortunately for me, I have to be stuck with these two crazy people, the old one and the crazy one, banker. And definitely, if there was one group that was the most diverse in the struggle, it was the Save the Gambia Democracy Project. And that could not have happened without you. Yes, Gambia L was there, Gambia Post was there, but that thing where it was now the human element, where got Wahaniki touch the person and meet with the person, definitely came as a result of your great idea. And I really, really want to thank you for it. And blame you too, Nena. I have to be stuck with Banka and Musa for the rest of my life. So
well, Pastor, thank you so much. Those are very, very kind words. But we did it all together.
Oh, yes.
We did it together right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And it is disconcerting to see how things have turned out in the end.
Yeah.
It's very true.
I don't want to go ahead of myself. But I do
Doctor, it's one thing. There was Gambia L, there was Gambia Post. There are a lot of ideas floating around.
Yeah.
But it's one thing to just sit down and put ideas on a Gambia Post or Gambia. It's another thing to take those ideas and make it a reality. I mean, that transition, it was definitely you who did it.
Thank you, Musa. When I joined Gambia L in the early 90s, I believe, I was kind of, disconcerted about the fact that there was so much criticism.
Yes.
It was all good. But I, at some point, decided to suggest that we begin doing something, organizing.
Correct.
And Save the Gambia Fund clearly came out of that thought. As Pasamba and the rest of you said, of it is really history.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
when people talk about GDF, and then there was a GDF before GDF.
Yeah.
So that was the whole concept. I remember, everybody who asked $5 and you know what's interesting though?
Yes.
When you came up with that idea, that was just after the 2002 parliamentary elections.
Yes.
2001, 2002 parliamentary. Yeah.
Yes.
I remember the person that I called Karamba Ture. We were okay. People maybe should exchange numbers and all these things. Then Karamba was in DC. I was just moving to DC. And it brought Karamba and myself together. And I remember we would be on the phone talking about, I remember the first time we were supposed to be, I was going to a protest in DC.
Yes.
Against America attacking Iraq or whatever, or Afghanistan. And then later we were on the phone. So just to the history, and I hope you will write a book about the struggle itself. I know there are a lot of ideas floating all over the place, but I think the books need to happen.
No, but if you read democratization, what was it again, Doctor? What's the name of the democratization in Africa? Something like that. The book.
Something like that.
There was a book that I did in 2000.
Yes.
I believe it was 2009.
Yes, that was after that. No, I'm talking about a more comprehensive one.
Yes, a more comprehensive one is needed, certainly.
Yep.
And, but I did touch on some of those items.
Yes, you did. I read it. I read
that book.
Yes.
When I'm going to make time.
Yes, you should.
Comprehensive book.
You should.
On that.
Well, Doctor, welcome again. I know you've just came back from the Gambia. You're pretty much now a returnee.
Yes.
In the same vein with, in the same boat with, what's his name again? Sol Menga and others.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but ma hegg nga Salum kay dégg naa nawet
Salum yoon bi waaye last year demoon naa Salum.
Fi mu ne nag ñu ngi gasam gerte ma ñu ngay gas gerte.
Xam naa léegi ñu bàcc moom.
Why no? It's up more mun yen no.
Isabella level la nekk.
But before I forget, somebody passed away the last few days, and I thought it's important to mention a couple of actually cases. One of them was a baby here in Atlanta. Watching the father bury his daughter was so heart-wrenching. It's not even funny. And Musa, I'm sure you are aware of this.
Yeah.
So really, our hearts and prayers go to Rohimbo and family. It was a very, very heart-wrenching affair. 1-month-old baby just died, and it was just really, 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 very, very hard.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yes.
Yes, definitely. The other one, this guy, you guys remember during the struggle, when I was on the radio, there used to be a guy who would call from the Gambia, and every time he used to call himself Karakadunga. I don't know whether you guys remember that.
Yes, I remember that. Yep.
Yes.
You know, and everybody just used to love it because and them, they used to love it when he called. Yeah. He was the one who actually passed away a few days ago. Yes, and very, very sad. And I'm talking, this guy will call right from the middle of the Gambia and call the program.
Yes, absolutely.
and go after Gambia. And everyone, yeah, so after the program, some of these folks will call me, the cracker called today, the cracker called today.
And Banka Hamidi C. Hamidu is cousins to Lamdo and
Seattle.
Yes, and Tukulor C and the whole Sikunda family. He's a brother because I'm Sikunda. So just want to extend our condolences to all those people that have passed away. It's crazy. I in fact saw today there was this guy called Kapi Seka. He used to play for Ball FC in Serakunda, also died. And there is another Usman Sampo Sise. I saw that today. I don't know which Sampo Sise is that, but it's an Usman Sampo Sise that they were
I think I saw it on Facebook too.
So but extend our condolences to all the families and
Samba, I just want to pick up on that to extend my condolences as well. Families, especially the C family.
Yes.
Because we are very close. I'm very close to the C family. The late Honorable Omar C.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amari and I were also very close. In fact, he lived with me for a while.
Wow.
I was teaching in Pullman, Washington. Great.
Wow.
So I'm shocked to hear he has died.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's terrible. That's my family. I lived with them in Basse. But now Dr. Saine, you just came back from the Gambia, and as the political mind, one of the sharpest, you are, I think, the only Gambian who's ever been ever had the title scholar. I think people may not understand. I've seen them join scholar groups or this thing. This is given to you by your peers. What is your overall assessment of what we are seeing in the Gambia, or the political assessment of over the past three and a half years?
Well, countries typically, when they go through what Gambia has gone through, is what we call a transition. But the Gambia is going through a process of de-transitioning. And by that I mean they are going back to how things were before the transition itself began. Because really, we are back to almost square one. We don't have the atrocities that Gambia committed, certainly. Civil rights and political rights, for the most part, are being respected. But when it comes to governance itself, we are not that much better off today than we were 3.5 years ago. Because really the political process has collapsed for all purposes. And these political parties and leaders are vying for their own survival. Barrow in particular, if you his entourage into Fatoto today, even in the midst of COVID-19, that he's campaigning to keep himself in power. So detransitioning is what we would call the current situation in the Gambia.
And what are the implications, short term, long term, of this detransitioning, given where we came from and how horrible it was?
Well, what that basically means that we would be going back to the 1997 Constitution if this draft Constitution doesn't pass. What that means, short term, is that Barrow could stay, he wins, potentially, for 2 more terms, including the one he might just win in 2021. So that would be 15 years. Another short term would be that we would really not have time limits, which is crucial for any democracy. And all the odious provisions that are in the Constitution would be upheld. In the long term, it's going to dig the Gambia into deeper and deeper misgovernance, corruption, and you know the story. It's not going to be like Jammeh's time, certainly, but it will be done in a legal fashion, where everybody who threatens them the least in an effort to maintain the power that they have.
Yeah, but you've mentioned the draft, that if it doesn't pass, you'll be going back to the 1997 Constitution. But you were not too crazy about the draft. You thought that, you know, a lot more could have happened. I've had the debate that you had, and I've read a document where you will not be crying. You'll not be one of those crying for the failure of the draft to pass. Where does that leave us? Because it's like we are between a rock and a hard place. You have the 1997 Constitution, which everybody says is crazy, and you have the draft, which somebody like you is not too crazy about. So how do we bridge the gap?
You know, that's a very good question. I'm really quite torn about the 1997 Constitution. But the current proposed Constitution, with all the good things that it has, term limits, protections for women and so forth and so on, and Christians, there are so many things that are lacking. I believe the failed constitution, draft constitution or bill, I don't like it for a number of reasons. It de-enfranchises most diaspora Gambians. And while I have gone back home, really, I still am part of this diaspora. Viewed as part of the diaspora. I also see the beginnings in this failed draft constitution. The early beginnings, in my view, are the rudiments of an Islamic state. Sharia, in my view, emboldened in this constitution, where that leaves women, to me, is very precarious, amongst other things. So, in short, those are some of the things that I have concerns about this draft constitution. I don't think we should rush. Just because the 1997 constitution had problems, we shouldn't replace it with some other constitution that also has many problems. I think we should be very careful in making sure that we have a draft constitution that is inclusive, that responds to the concerns of most Gambians, but we must not forget the minorities as well.
Now, Fana Joke, Jem, go ahead.
Doctor, thanks again. Welcome to the 40 People by the People. I just want to follow up with that thread. I read the same, your reaction to the draft constitution. And then there was something that you said that kind of caught my attention. It said, the drafters themselves, basically, their political inclination or biases seep into the draft constitution. What do you mean by that?
Well, Musa, that's a very great question. Look, what I'm suggesting in short is that these drafters are not above class, institutional, and party interests. They themselves have vested interests in the Constitution and how it comes out. If you look at the ways in which the judges are enumerated, their pensions, and the privileges that they enjoy vis-a-vis the ordinary Gambian, it far outweighs, I mean, the performance and the duties that other people do. What I'm saying essentially is they are fundamentally a political elite. And what I was saying in that article or op-ed is that they are not above politics, the drafters. Yes, the Constitution may be couched in legal language, but fundamentally the Constitution is a political document. And see what happened. It was divided in terms of the vote. You had the National Assembly, you had the NAMS on one hand, you had the executive, and then you have the judiciary, all vying for power. And they could not agree on how the cake, basically, was going to be divided. And that's what I was focusing on. So it makes the chairperson, the commissioners, and the CRC fundamentally very political in the ways they behave. They had a lot of discretion. They had a lot of discretion, but they didn't exercise it.
But let me play the devil's advocate and come to their defense a little bit, Dr. Saine. Let's look at the process itself. Because I've listened to the chairperson, was it like a couple of days ago? And they're saying, look, we were given a job to do by the National Assembly with the terms of reference, what they wanted us to work on. We did consultation from Banjul to Koina, every hamlet. We, for the first time, went to the diaspora and talked to the Gambians themselves. In other words, they listened to Gambians, and based on that consultation, they were able to come with a document. Whether they like it or not, the chairman went into, they had to use some statistical, let's say, for instance, the role of the diaspora, whether the diaspora can run for president. I don't know whether you're familiar with my advocacy here. Every Sunday, I used to attack the draft, saying that we are being discriminated. But they're basically saying, look, there's not much we can do. We cannot impose our own, whatever we believed in. What we have here is a reflection of what we heard from Gambians. And at the same time, the terms of reference we were given by the National Assembly. Take the case of the secular, for instance. They're saying, look, if we were to put the word secular there, the chances are this thing is not going to pass. But we had enough protection there to make sure that minority protections are there. You talk about the remunerations, for instance. They'll tell you, look, what we want here, a judge that is not corruptible. We all heard about Nigerian mercenaries, how judges can be corrupted. So all we did here is to make sure, in other words, if you really listen to their defense, I mean, I'm still a little bit it kind of caught my attention when you said that they were being political and then some of their ideas seep into the draft. I mean, what say you?
Well, Musa, I think there's a very good defense of the CRC. And I do agree with the fact that the consultations were quite extensive and they listened to what Gambians had to say. But there were many instances in the Constitution or in the draft where exercised considerable discretion, especially when it came to the issue of citizenship. When it came to, let's say, an 80-year-old child who was born in the Gambia, they decided to basically pass the buck to the National Assembly. When it came to gay rights, they should not even mention it, they passed the buck, among so many other things. I'm suggesting is, yes, these guys listened, but they also had considerable discretion, which they exercised. They basically denied diaspora Gambians born in the diaspora. I'm thinking here of African Americans or Brazilian Africans. They basically denied them citizenship. Precisely because they felt that could potentially turn the political equation against their favor. And I do believe the reason why diasporans are denied systematically, especially dual citizenship, are denied the right to vote, not to vote, but to run for elections.
Run for the presidency.
It's a political fact. They are defending the current political elite. Who is the biggest threat to the current political elite, if not the diaspora? So yes, while they did all that, Musa, I do believe that they had considerable discretion, and the discretion when they took it was very conservative and was in favor of the political class.
But don't you think, though, if they were to exploit those discretions like you put them, then that they would be guilty of kind of what I would say, imposing their own, call it radical view. For instance, the gay rights. I mean, everywhere that they went, whether Korlamba Balangar, I mean, they'll tell you, I mean, that's what they were hearing.
Yes.
In as much as some of us would sit here and say, look, these people also, their right needs to be protected. But they're saying, look, that's not what we're hearing from Gambians. When you talk about even us running for president, the diaspora, which I believe we've been discriminated against. But I'm telling you, a good percentage of Gambians on the ground were basically telling them that, fairly or unfairly. So I'm saying what you have on the draft was pretty much what they were hearing from Gambians, in as much as and more so of that than their own political leanings or inclination, or they would be political. I mean, but I want to get to my last questions before Banker comes in. Dr. Saine, the role of the diaspora, for instance, we've all heard from government, even Jame and in this current government, that there are a lot of human resources that needs to be tapped into. We all hear that story. I have experienced it myself back in the early 90s, going back home and then realizing that, wow, this is not really working for me. There's always this talk. I had an interview on Viewpoint in the journalist was basically saying,
it was very good.
Yeah, they were saying, well, yeah, I mean, you guys are all talk. Why don't you come and make the difference here and contribute? Now, I heard from the grapevine, you went back home. We all saw you on the TRRC. I mean, and then there's a lot of talk. The universities to really reach out to somebody like Dr. Saine. Even people were saying becoming a vice chancellor. But I heard from the grapevine, you had an experience that is unbelievable. In other words, they do not even want to utilize a Dr. Saine at the Gambia University. Can you kind of walk us through this whole talk about they need to reach out to human resource in the diaspora and the reality on the ground? Dr. Saine.
Well, Musa, that's a very good question. And thank you for that, for the opportunity. You know, for the last 3 years, there has been talk about recruiting Dr. Saine to come head the university and so forth and so on. It's been a lot of talk. Nothing fundamental has emerged from that. But let me share with you an experience I had with UTG. While I was there this time around for 8 months, I visited university, expressed to them my desire to teach and so forth and so on. And really, they didn't contact me for anything. And a position opened up, a position that was for Director of Research, Evaluation, and Innovation. And I applied for the position, Musa.
Oh, really?
And when I went in, after they had me stay outside with some people outside for 2.5 hours, water, no place to sit, not even a drink, I went in, and here they were sitting in a very plush, air-conditioned with their lunch and water. I came in, and my interview didn't last 10 minutes.
Oh, no.
Really?
Yes, after waiting for 2.5 hours. And then they asked me if I had anything to ask. And I said, yes. And I asked a few questions here and there. When is the job beginning? Da-da-da-da-da, and so forth. I would not miss the opportunity. And then basically how I felt, that it was unacceptable for professionals like themselves and myself and others for us to be corralled in the hallway without a drink, nothing, not even a place to sit for 2.5 hours. And I said that very politely. But the point was made that this is not done. That if you're having an interview of this type, it might be better to consider staggering the interview. At 9 o'clock, another at 10 o'clock, and so forth and so on. Musa reminded me 50 years ago when I qualified from Union College. I was outside of the PSC. One by one.
Yeah.
50 years later, that type of thing is still going on in the Gambia or at least at the UTG. So
wow.
about 2 weeks ago, I received an email from the registrar saying that they have decided to offer the job to somebody else. And I thanked him for their indulgence and wished the guy who was selected the best of luck. But even those guys who were interviewing with me, they were telling me, oh yeah, Professor said you should get this job. I mean, you're very qualified, you have experience and da-da-da-da-da. And the young ones, you can mentor us and so forth and so on. But this is my experience in Gambia. There's a lot of talk, but really very little action.
Wow.
Wow. There
I'm
you
so
have it.
sorry about that. That's a horrible experience. I can imagine.
Unbelievable. There's always this talk about diasporans. You guys need to send what
a big loss for the country anyway.
And make it different. I mean, if the University of the Gambia, they do not want to exploit the Dr. Sens of this world. Now, I don't know who they want to, who they really.
There are just, but there are just so many Gambians resident in Gambia now who are retired, semi-retired, wealth of experience in all fields, you name it. And most of them are basically sitting down doing other things.
Yeah.
To do with government.
Consulting, they would call it.
Yeah, consulting, yes.
Glorified unemployed. Basically, that's what it is.
That's basically what it is.
Yeah.
I think they are threatened by our presence.
Yeah.
Certainly, they don't want us to be part of the, but they are hiring other people though. They are making some people ambassadors, some people secretary generals, and so forth and so on. But not the types of Dr. Saine and
you gotta be political.
No, but this is an institution of learning. You would think that the University of the Gambia is where they will encourage the Dr. Saines to go instead of the diplomatic corps, because that's where the debate is going to take place to shape the nation and its future. That's where you need Dr. Saines, people who will come from a whole different angle. I mean, let's have the institutions of learning as diverse as they need to be. This is where you mold young people, you know? I'm sorry.
I couldn't agree with you, Banker. I'm more.
Yeah.
I mean, I was ready to even, do whatever I can on a voluntary basis. Money, certainly. Because that job was...
So this idea of that somehow we don't want this job for financial reasons. It's all talk.
No. It's not it's not for financial reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the job was paying about $600 for a whole $700 for a whole director.
And that's $600 a month.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, because some people might be hearing this and saying, oh, you know what, and all that stuff. But I don't think if money was the issue, you would not be applying for a university in the Gambia. You would have been teaching, anywhere else.
I applied.
Yeah.
I knew the salary before I applied. And I said, I'll just apply and help out as much as I possibly can. Teach a class here and there. Just get my foot into the university.
Yeah.
But
unbelievable.
It didn't work out.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Really
why not? They're lost. I mean, if you ask me, I mean, just like my own mom used to say, Nyoko Jube.
But yeah, Doctor, with the Constitution, a lot of it has been an intellectual exercise, if you will. And I saw the volleys, the fireworks that were being thrown all over the place. I mean J Dabo will fire one, and then will fire one, and then I'm just sitting there watching it all crossing over. I'm like, this is great. But now let's get to the basics of it, though. And I'm sure you are more familiar with these things more than I do, since you are the expert in this matter. Now, US, now you are. US, for instance, you look at their process for building the Constitution. 5 people were the ones who wrote, literally drafted the Constitution of the United States. 5 people: John Quincy Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and I believe 2 other people. These were the drafters who drafted it. And then you had 55 delegates who were basically, you know, the delegates were picked from everywhere, and they finally did the ratification and stuff like that.
Right.
Now, but then during the course of that process, those delegates, this was a tough case, because you have the slaveholding states, you have this, you have that, merchants, everybody came with their own little agenda. And they were watching what was written. I mean, anything in it that didn't align, but was not, you know, was in conflict with their state's interest or the powerful, whatever, you know, business folks, you know how it is, their interest, they fought against it. And in the end, even the issue of slavery, I mean, blacks, was not fully clear in many ways in the final draft, because they had to horse trade. They knew if they didn't do that, then it's not going to work. So it took many more years of you know, amendments and stuff like that, a process to work through the final deal. And that's why US still, they call it perfecting the union, because they know this process will just keep going on for eternity. But one thing that binded all of those people together, as far as their mindset, even though they had their political considerations and their business considerations, they also were trying to do 2 things. That is, to address the problem of that time, and also lay down some fundamental enduring principles on which the country will be rested for eternity, ones that are enduring, I mean, for eternity. So, and to some extent, they were able to do that. In our case, where do you think that process went wrong?
I believe it went wrong precisely where personal, professional sensibilities were not tamed. I think they injected a lot of that, especially their religious beliefs, into the Constitution. Even though Gambia is fundamentally a majority Muslim state, I think they embellished the feelings and what Gambians said. And more their own beliefs, religious beliefs, and their political sensibilities. I don't think Gambians would necessarily want elevating Sharia to the extent to which this constitution does. Equally, I don't believe that constitution or the draft constitution that has just failed would have excluded necessarily children born in the country, 8 years old, and being denied citizenship. These are some of the things that I'm suggesting, Musa, you know, to go back earlier to your question. I believe Gambians spoke, but I think the drafters went overboard in my feelings. In my they went overboard in embellishing what Gambians said. Actually, I would have liked maybe the National Assembly, and this is where I agree with Halifa Saleh. They could have brought this 1997 Constitution very carefully, weed out the most odious provisions,
right,
and talk about it in the National Assembly, and really make it a better Constitution, and then ratified by the National Assembly and then put to a referendum. I would have preferred that. It would have saved money, time, and it would have been further along. That's my personal view.
So now, but this thing at some point had to have a horse trading going on throughout the whole process, whether it's at the parliamentary process, the cabinet process, the at the referendum process, where you finally would get enough buy-in to get it passed somehow. So that means pretty much compromising on certain things, don't you think?
Yes.
Just like you are saying, those guys were embellishing. On the other hand, Jallow could say, Dr. Saine is just being too ambitious on this. Because at the end of the day, or too idealistic on this.
Yeah.
Yes. Because at the end of the day, what we thought was going to get the deal done, what's going to pass, is what we are looking to. That is, this is what the Gambian people demanded, and this is what we are willing to give them, because otherwise, the Muslims, for instance, will look at this constitution and say, we are not going to vote for this. On the other hand, the Christians too, if it didn't cater to their needs, will look at it and say, we are not going to vote for this. And then who ends up voting for it? Nobody. So it will fail. Don't you think they are being pragmatic in that regard, just like the US did with theirs, rather than just insisting that a certain language of slavery and all these things have to be in the draft? They have to say, what, we have to give some way here, go against our own principles, because otherwise this might not work. Don't you think? No?
I think they did that. And in instances where they did that, I think they did it well. Look, this is a very difficult process. And I think to these people, to the commissioners, including the chairman, and all of them, I have very high regard for them. But you see, they were trying to produce a document that would satisfy the entire population.
Yeah.
And I think they should have scaled it down further. The way it is now really ended up failing anyway, even though it reflects to some degree the sensibilities of most Gambians. I think if they had tailored it further and tempered their own sensibilities and not ratcheting up some of the concerns that Gambians have expressed, possibly some of those things could have passed, or the Constitution could have passed. But I really take my hat off. In my initial review of the Constitution, or draft, I really said a lot of great things that the draft had. But I also raised some concerns about the ways in which they went about some things. It's a difficult process. I think if they had had a low common denominator Constitution, the bare bones, so to speak, would probably have passed with some.
But now, Doctor, why is it therefore then that those who failed this constitution, because it failed at the parliamentary process, those who failed this constitution, not a single one raised any of the issues you are raising? In other words, their issue was not, now we know that it wasn't even about issue A or issue B. Yes. They just wanted this two-term thing to extend to a certain thing, and they also wanted the powers that were given to Parliament be shifted back to the executive. Powers, things like that. Those were the ones we are looking for, not for this very high ideal stuff like, let's have a neutral.
Well, you're right. That's where the politics come in. That's where party politics and party interests, institutional interests come in. These guys were concerned more about preserving their positions, their privileges, just like the judiciary. So it was a tug of war. It was a cake. I mean, metaphorically, the Constitution is a piece of cake. The judiciary would like to have their share, the executive, as well as the National Assembly. And whatever benefits, I argue, that Gambians would have benefited, it would have been incidental to their own fundamental institutional, party, and individual interests. So I'm glad you brought that up. It was just another way of saying, look, we are not satisfied, because even the cabinet, the military, fell sidelined. So this is a deeply political document. And what the Times did was to suggest that really the division of power, the division of labor, And the power dividends are not commensurate with what we believe we should have. So we're gonna frustrate it, basically.
All right. Now, Doctor, we just had the Minister of Justice here, and he is talking about ways of salvaging this situation and maybe empaneling a group of people to look at the document and see how they can make it work. If you were to be contacted, because it is of my view, you may not be a lawyer, but one of the most qualified political minds that the Gambia has ever produced. Will that be something that you would be interested in participating to help, giving your experience, your knowledge and everything to help at least salvage this document?
Absolutely, Pasamba. When I went to Gambia last year in 2019, I was also there for 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
I volunteered in drafting the national security policy.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I spent almost a month and a half working with them, and in the end, with some other people, helped rewrite a significant part of it,
mm-hmm.
editing it, and so forth and so on. And I also taught at the university. So I'm available. And I believe they need people from a diverse set of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
With due respect to the chairperson and the rest of the commissioners, they are all very talented and qualified.
Mm-hmm.
My only reservation is they have what I call groupthink.
Mm-hmm.
Their professional training, their judicial temperament, and so forth and so on, make them believe that what they are doing may represent the best way. It is a good way. What I'm suggesting is they should have a cross-section of Gambians within. They should have trade unionists. They should have social scientists, anthropologists. They should have really a cross-section of Gambians who come to this constitution with a different frame of reference.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if they were to do that, they would probably produce a better constitution. Look, it is also important to self-reflect, to interrogate yourself. What am I bringing into this? What are my values? What are my biases? What are my blind spots? And I think if we were to do that and make the methodology that they used more rigorous, I think it would have produced perhaps a better constitution. Look, these guys are liberal in terms not only of their philosophy, but also their methodology. And when you look at the social sciences, the academic sciences, or even the physical sciences, there are contending debates over what methodologies to use when it comes to something like this. I think these methodologies, perspectives should have been represented right from the beginning to make it a more comprehensive, a more sellable constitution. So yes, in short, I'll be happy to help in any way that I can.
Now, the other question that I have, Doctor, here is we all know that the diaspora, if you talk about human resources, we have it in abundance. Financially, we contribute almost 25 to whatever percentage GDP. But what we continually hear is complaints about how we are being sidelined. How do we overcome that where we are not? Because it looks like there is a barrier. Diasporas are seen as the bad ones in some instances, as if we are not Gambians. How do we work to overcome these things? It's like my thing is, I believe that we are stigmatized.
Yes.
When it is good, you want them. When you need money.
Yes.
Now, when your son sends you money, that's your son. But when they have an opinion out there, that's the diaspora. Dañ foog ñoom moom dëkk bi ñoo ñu gën a xam dëkk bi bu ñu gëtee ñu pare di wax. But when we need something, you go to them. But how do we bridge this gap for the average Gambian to understand first, that we are just as Gambian as them.
Absolutely.
And second, we mean no harm. And then third, how do we overcome this marginalization that happens, in the government? Because the government, when they came, they did the same thing too.
Oh, yeah, it's been awesome. This has been a real problem right from the get-go. If you remember when we started the struggle, they would send the money, and if we wanted to inject our opinions, they would quickly silence us.
Yep.
Now we're trying to ask Jammeh, we are all too eager to see him out. So we didn't have any preconditions for sending money. But I think that the role of the diaspora should be supporting those National Assembly members, lobbying them, and making sure that they basically support our agenda. If it means financing them, even if it means really supporting a political party, as at its core, the interests of the diaspora. And we can rally around a political party or political parties who will, in a sense, represent our interests. Otherwise, we will continue to be marginalized. There are a few new political parties that I believe have at their core interests of the diaspora. And I think we should be lobbying them, talking to the leaders, because really, the current status quo, for 22 years, we've been working with them. That is the UDP in particular. And really, we have nothing.
We just lost Dr. Saine.
To show.
How do we lose Banker? Does he do this now every time we have a show? He will just have to lose it.
You can still hear us, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, it's just Banker.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Saine.
I think we should really be lobbying those political.
I hope people are. Let me see. Yeah.
And I think the initiative also that passed on by you and Bibi Dabo, Chernonja, and the others have initiated of the Constitution, the draft Constitution. And I believe that's perhaps one way. That's perhaps one important way of reducing, to some degree, the level of marginalization that we suffer. We have to be involved by lobbying, supporting a political party, the norms that stand for our interests. Simple as that.
That's good. But go ahead, Musa.
You sure?
Yeah, no, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
because a question of Abuda. I just wanted to ask Dr. Saine this.
No,
Dr. Saine. You've had your chance with Dr. Saine. So give me the chance. Yeah, here is the issue. Thank you very much for bringing that lawsuit that is brought about. Hopefully, pretty soon something will come out of it. And this is something that we've been fighting for. If you remember, I remember immediately after NAD was formed, before the 2006 elections, we wrote a letter to the IEC trying to make this happen. But I think utilizing the courts, I think, is the best way to deal with some of the issues.
Yes.
But there is something that somebody said here. Listen, you're humble, but you're not ordinary Gambian.
I am.
In that you are a giant in your field. And this is why your colleagues bestowed on you the title of a scholar. This is not something that is given to anybody. Just because you have a PhD doesn't make you a scholar. You have to work on it. Even though one time I remember you telling me an intellectual you believe is somebody who agitates, not necessarily somebody theoretic. But there is this suggestion by Matar Sajau, like a Dr. Saine Foundation in the Gambia for learning, research, and education, or whatever it is. Is this something that you are thinking about, either short term or long term, to establish it, where you will help to mold the minds of Gambians, the young ones, so that at least they would value not only research and knowledge gathering, but at least service to nation?
Pasamba, that's a very good question. I have several plans in mind. I have been interested in so many things, including a center for peace, research, and democracy. I've also been interested in a project for water, especially for the rural areas. So for now, I really have a lot of things up in the air. And certainly when I settle in properly, I will settle on one of those. What is dearest to me, though, as you suggest, is mentoring students, young faculty, young professionals, reading books, making suggestions, and so forth and so on. So it's possible that in the future, some sort would be something I would invest in. I have thought about it because I do know that the university I might find too limiting. For government, I also would find very limiting. I would kind of be muzzled in terms of what I say or what I can say or what I can write. So I'm really enjoying my current status, speaking out, writing, and even doing some public service announcements when it comes to COVID-19. So really there are just so many things, Pasamba, including scholarship, that I would like to pursue in the long term. Certainly.
So, all yours.
I'm going to be asking money from you guys.
Good.
So
no, furthermore, you're skipping the line.
It's me. Then Pasamba. Then it's back to me again.
Go ahead. Don't listen to Baka.
Doctor, whose turn? On my turn.
No, I don't like it. Doctor,
go ahead.
I want to query. I mean, obviously, you are a political scientist. I want to query about this democracy and this election thingy. I call it election thingy. I mean, looking at Gambia and our situation, Doctor, come 2021, we're going to have elections.
Yes.
Elections and democracy is supposed to be electing good people that will represent us.
Yes.
But it looks like this process, it's not really working. We all see it, really. Every 4 or 5 years, we go to these polls. We all know how sometimes they are determined. You know, I've said here before, and I get into trouble, that most of these elections are determined by the power of incumbency, is determined by, you know, identity politics, is defined by patronage. We see, I mean, Barrow right now at URR. You know, you could see this movie, and you could see how this whole thing is going to end. Is there another way that we can do this thing? Is this democracy and elections, and is this really the ideal solution to our problems? I mean, or am I just being crazy?
No, Musa, I think that's a very important point. Look, I have argued elsewhere, I think in the second piece I did, Shed No Tears, that democracy is for the few, is for the elite. They can do as they please while marginalizing the majority of Gambians. That's why we have elections every 5 years without much changing. I think we need, in my view, a rethink. We need a rethink of where we want Gambia to go. What kind of political dispensation should be put in place? And more importantly, what economic system we need to put in place. You see, the Constitution failed to address that, the draft Constitution, because all of them assumed that the capitalist way of doing things was the best way to go. And that is another blinder that the Constitution failed to address. I think we should be looking for a leadership, a young leadership that is committed to transforming the economic systems, the political systems of the Gambia to include the majority. This is democracy for the few. This is not democracy for the majority. I believe that a need-based system where we try to meet the basic needs of Gambians through agriculture, health, you name it, is perhaps the best way to go. I'm not saying we do it like Tanzania did, but we can copy a lot from Tanzania as well as Botswana. We can have a party or parties that are committed to the economic system that Gambians have chosen. Any other party coming in has to go by those rules and regulations.
But you're still going to have competition and political parties running for office. Is that what you're saying? Or, I mean, it has to be.
There should still be some competition.
Huh?
I believe there should still be some elections
Mm-hmm.
in the political process. But really, when we don't have the level of social and economic consciousness, it's going to be difficult unless there is a group of leaders who really have the interests of the majority of Gambians. Because really, these guys that are in power play lip service for the most part. There are a few exceptions. But for the majority of them, since independence, can you explain the poverty and the destitution we find ourselves in Gambia? So we don't still have the leadership. But I think I have hope in the emergence of a young, talented, like yourselves, talented group who, through elections, can capture the apparatus of the state and implement a system that caters to the needs and aspirations of Gambians. We've never had that so far. And it's going to be difficult. We may need to have a national conference where we have all stakeholders from the provinces to come and hammer out, where do we want Gambia in the next 25, 50 years? We can debate it, and from that, we can distill a framework for governance, a framework for the economy, and a framework for everything else that is going to be in the country. So I don't want to impose something. I think we really need a national conference because Gambians are not happy. They have never been happy for the last 55 years. And unless we have a national conference that would enable us to hammer out what kind of Gambia do we want? What kind of Gambia do we want to produce in our institutions? We'll just be going through the same process with nothing much changing.
Yeah, I'm not only forming all these multiple parties all over the place. I don't think that's going to cut it. I mean, that much I know. I don't think it's really not going to cut it. But like I said, the next, obviously, put on your punditry hat. You were in the Gambia for the past, since January, I think.
Yes.
And 2021 is around the corner. And you've seen, so how do you think this whole thing is going to, some are saying,
yes,
this has become a binary choice. You're going to have the United Democratic Party on one hand, then you're going to have the NPP, the new party in the ring. And people are saying, watch out for APRC. They are going to be the kingmakers. Some are saying, well, don't be careful with the Dois of this world. Maybe Gambians are seeing them differently. Can you kind of give us your take on how 2021 is going to play out?
Well, thank you, Musa. I'm glad you brought up APP, the Party Fana. I'm the interim Secretary General of APP. And it is a party that is committed really to catering to the interests of the diaspora. More importantly, it is also committed to a needs-based development plan. All the development plans we've had for the last God knows how long, they have basically all failed. But the new parties, I think, have new thinking and new blood that may, in the end, salvage or help salvage our dear country. 2021, I think Musa, my guess is as good as anybody else's. There's going to be a wide polarization between the Barrow camp on one hand and the Dabo camp, putting it simply. And the rest of the parties are going to be courted to align with either. I think the smaller parties like APP and really those that just came to the scene may align themselves with one party or the other. Especially if it is first past the post. I think that would be their best bet to align themselves with one of these groups. I think in the end it's going to be between those two. If Dabo can run, I believe he'll be able to run. But again, I'm not a legal scholar. If it happens to two of them, Mama Kande could go either way. I know NRP is certainly with Barrow. And PPP looks like they are leading toward Barrow. And it appears to me, of course, APRC, and especially with the new ministerial appointments, of course,
Baji.
Yes, I think he's really pandering to the APRC as well as the Fonu Combo constituency. So it's going to be very interesting. I cannot wait to go back and be part of this unfolding political process. In fact, when I saw Barrow this morning or earlier today in URR, he is in full-blown campaign.
Yeah.
And even in the midst of this COVID-19,
right,
he's paying little attention to that. So Musa, really, my guess is as good as anybody else's. I think we're going to be seeing a cluster of parties, maybe two, smaller ones aligning one way or the other, in a nutshell.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Saine. Banga.
That's interesting. So, Doctor,
Banka here?
I'm here. Can you hear me, Doctor?
Yes, I can hear you, Banka.
Oh, okay. What coach is saying is Banka here.
I'm not hearing. Go ahead.
Anyway, so the politics of where we are right now, if you look at the formations, the political parties, how they are all coming about, it looks like we have a very, how would I call it? I don't want to use the word tribal because that may not necessarily be technically what I really mean. But I see a very sectional grouping, if we will. And it does, in many cases, do take form of tribal association. And so when Musa said, jokingly, Fana party, you can, I mean, he can be forgiven for that because, I mean, APP, really, is it? APP, right? APP, I mean, when I saw the list of the officials and everything, I was like, okay. So, but again, it could also be called a sectional thingy because if you look at you all from the same area, related somehow, or in the same neighborhood somehow, so you don't know how to frame it really in that regard. But that's not limited to APP. You have all the other parties that are technically in so many senses like that. Yeah. Where do you think that our politics is gonna end up in the next? I don't want to use the coming elections, but say in the next 5 years. Where do you see our politics going? Because it seems as if with this, what it was supposed to be a transitional period, but budged transitional period, I call it. We are drifting. That group forms there, that group forms there. They don't like what's going on this way, and many of them out of frustration with the status quo, obviously. But still, it's happening in a manner that really is only going to create more division rather than what we all are decrying.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of frustration in the country.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of fragmentation based on ethnicity, class, economics in the country.
Mm-hmm.
We are also politically very fragmented, to the point of acrimony. That is the nature of the system as it is. I think ethnicity or tribe is just another tool in the hands of the politicians, just like race. That they will use to garner votes and to sell the agenda. It serves them, they will use it, and they will use it shamelessly. At the core of it all is to protect their political and economic interests. I think that's, in the end, that's why they use, so-called tribe, violent force. All these parties really began as a consequence of a small group of people who may belong to the same ethnicity, come from the same town or the region. Most of the parties started that way. Even the great PPP was the People's Protected Party, evolved into PPP. We hope that APP and the other parties, NPP, would become more national in character. And I think UDP is trying to do that. UDP, since its inception, has been accused of being a Mandinka party. But really, I think they have broken out of that mold. The belief continues to this day. I think it is more diverse, political than most others. But these are young parties. The APP will take time before it becomes a national party, similar to the UDP and the APP.
Yeah. So now, with the coming elections, I know there will be coalitions and stuff that will go on. We talked about the way and manner, and we've discussed this at length here before. The possibility of violence, if you will, for the simple reason that there is so much at stake and so much hanging on this election. It's not even funny. Because when you look at the different players, the parties, that is, NPP cannot afford to lose because we have a zero-sum game in our political system. We have the Roman system. If you are on the losing side, you are dead. PPP, the UDP cannot afford to lose because already you can see where we are going. Barrow has gone in firing people from the government simply because they are UDP. APRC, there is a lot hanging on that party and its future because of this election, for the coming elections. So between these three, because this is where I see mainly the danger within that zone right there. What do we do to avert such a situation? Because I know come campaign season, this is not going to be pretty. It's going to be nasty. It's going to be, I cannot even imagine how it's going to look like during the campaign season. When you put on your political lenses, as being a political expert, if you will, what would you say to Gambians at this point of the game?
You have adequately described all the ingredients that make for a very volatile, very violent political campaign and election. The polarization is one thing. The animosity between the two main parties and their leaders. And clearly, more importantly, it's a zero-sum game. Winner takes all. So the ground is already prepared for such an eventuality. I believe there are things that can be put in place. to help contain the potential for violence. Again, it will take the leadership and civil society organizations, including the religious organizations, to impress upon the population and the leadership the need for a peaceful outcome in the election.
Hello, Doctor.
Okay. Or the police, or the security sector reforms were undertaken more effectively earlier, then I would have suggested perhaps the likelihood of violence would be significantly minimized. But in the absence of that, Banker, it makes the Gambia all the more volatile. I am hoping that ECOMIC would be around to help douse potential violence or any outbreaks of violence. But it's going to take all of us, civil society organizations, including the religious organizations, the youth, because they are more.
Is it me or Dr. Saine's line is hanging up?
No,
is it?
No, I think it's freezing, Dr. Saine.
Violence. We need to conduct these affairs in a very peaceful way.
Yeah. Well,
because my neck Banka Musa. Can I go with my question or Banka is still
asking? No,
I can hear him.
Mr. Saine.
I can drop him and he can
Dr. Saine. He can hear me? Okay.
Can you hear Pastor?
Yes, I can hear Pastor.
Yes. Dr. Saine, you are from the provinces, from Kawur. You mentioned here the good PPP, good old PPP, Protectorate People's Party. The reason why they formed that party was so that at least to serve as a bridge, at least to serve as a representative of the disenfranchised, the marginalized, that was the provinces. The farmers, as I said, are the hardest working people in that country. They work harder than anybody else with limited tools, but yet still they remain the poorest. And my belief is that 56 years, our governments have successively failed the majority of Gambians, and those are the Gambians in the provinces. Still live in detached houses, the dilapidated roads, no hospitals, no good schools, nothing. What do you think? How do you think we can bridge this gap where we can at least be able to take care of the majority of Gambians who are not asking for handouts, who work real hard, but continue to wallow in abject poverty?
Well, Pa, I was alluding to something like that earlier. It will take all of us coming together, especially the farmers, outside the political leaders, and all interested parties to hammer out a national development plan that really focuses on providing for the basic needs of the population. Now, PTOIS has a similar agenda, or has always had a popular-based agenda, looking at the marginalized, for the poor. And if we can bring ideas of that sort, and bringing all the trade unionists, and the farmers, the drivers, the fishermen, market women, they will tell us exactly what it is that they want in Gambia, for Gambia. Because these systems have not served them, and they are the majority of the people. Look, to put it bluntly, all these development plans have served the interests of the elite. That's why this constitution, draft constitution, as of now, has failed. Because they are not agreeing to the spoils and how the spoils are to be divided, how the power dynamics are going to be shared. Unless we have a development process that focuses on the poor, the women, the marginalized, and the majority I think we will continue to languish and jump from one development plan to another. Development plan in place now has basically failed. And the others before it have also failed. We need a rethink and reorient the country in a different direction. And that would mean focusing on the marginalized, the majority. Of course, not at the expense of the elite. The elite will also have their share. Because when all Gambians are relatively comfortable, they have water, they have food to eat, good health care, they have good implements and fertilizers for their farms, then the owners would not want you, Pa, Samba, Musa, and Banka to be sending money home or as frequently. You would not be paying for school fees and medications. Or if you do, it will be limited. So what I'm saying is it's a win-win situation. The elite, however, have been very, very selfish. It's politics of the belly. You eat as much as you can and then leave it to those that follow to do precisely the same thing. I think we need to get together as a people, hammer out a national development plan where we want the country to be 15, 20, 25 years, and really focus on the poor, the women, and the marginalized.
Yeah. Talking about the poor, since the advent of the Gambia, since independence, we've relied entirely on budget support, debt, loan and grants or whatever. As we speak, the current budget, I think 9 out of 22 billion was for debt servicing. Do you think it is sustainable to continue to build an economy of a sovereign country based entirely on budget support from other countries and loans? And how do we, I know you're talking about, like Musa, to use Musa's words, a transformative leadership. Since we don't have anything transformational right now or transformative as we speak with the current dispensation, and the future of our country is at stake, the future of our kids is at stake. How do we move away from this? I know you talked about a national conference where we can have this rethink of the whole country, look at our economy again, look at the productive sectors of our economy, and you look at the ocean. I am associated with DOI. Since 1986, we've been talking about the ocean, the amount of wealth that can be derived from the ocean. 1986, I'm not talking about 96 or 2006 or 2016, 1986. And as we speak today, the Chinese are exploiting that, in the process destroying our environment. The EU has come to us and gave us, I think they say 500,000 euros a year to fish, what do they call it, tuna from our oceans. Our Gambian women or the Gambian people are now suffering because they could not find fish. How do we move away from this? How do we bring the transformational leadership under the current situation to bring this rethink?
But those are difficult questions, and these are questions we grapple with. In I teach on IPE, International Political Economy. What is the role of foreign direct investments in a polity or economy such as ours? What role would the state play, or what roles would the state play? What would be the role of all stakeholders in the economy? I believe we need, in addition to a good transformative leadership, at least a leadership that is very committed to Gambia, first of all, not necessarily to our own pockets, but the people of the Gambia, and a desire to see themselves move the agenda, improve their lives, and make it a stable economy. I think in this regard, if we were to have at least a basic minimum of a committed leadership, and I think we can have the state play a very critical role. Of course, with adjustment and all that, the role of the state was minimized. But I think we have an enlightened state, a state that intervenes prudently to curb excesses of the rich and elevate the poor, and to address those decades-long inequalities in our society. I think even before the transformative leadership come, that would be a good place to start. Enlightened leadership to some degree, who are interested in Gambia and moving forward the whole process, and a state that really plays a critical role to some degree with the distribution of goods and services. So I'm thinking about the state and enlightened leadership, as well as, say, the trade unions and the drivers, the population. Combined, I believe, you can have a system that may be salvageable in the absence of a transformative leadership.
Well, Dr. Dawda, my last question, but I have to plug in your book before I go here, Musa.
Yes.
This book is State and Society in the Gambia since Independence, 1965 to 2012. It is edited by three of, I believe, the greatest minds, Dr. Saine, Dr. Ibrahima Sise, and Dr. Ibrahima Sall. And the reason why I'm putting this up, I believe that it is a great investment. If you want to know the Gambia or anything political, even if you don't, and you have kids, I think it's a great investment. Doctor didn't make me to do this, but I have this book and I value it very much. And this is where you get a lot of information that you may need about the Gambia. So if you need, it's on Amazon. It's less than $50, so you should be able to get it for your kids if you don't want to read.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Doctor, for joining us. Thank you.
Doctor.
But I also want to plug in the Culture and Customs of Gambia, which I wrote in 2012. And it's really geared towards the kids' high school and junior high school.
Which one was that?
And you can also get it on Amazon.
Good.
Culture and Customs of Gambia.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I'll
Culture and Customs of Gambia.
Yeah, if you can send me that information later, Doctor, if you can text it to me, I will.
And it's directed actually to younger people.
Okay.
Doctor, I wanted to just follow up with Pasamba because it bothers me a little bit.
By the way, if I may interject quickly, Father Mose, I have a meeting at the hall at 5:30. It's almost 5, just so you know. No.
Because I also have to go.
I know Muta is saving for much more right now. He's just like, okay, now I can give me the now.
No, this has something to do because I heard even during the when our development partners send that letter to the National Assembly, Africans, we tend to have this tendency to basically point fingers at they'll call it this budget support. And I'm like, budget support is not the problem.
Yes.
When you have a budget of expenses, whether it's capital related, you have all these departments, and you don't have the tax base from your people to fund it.
Yes.
And this is where the budget support comes in. So whatever the problem is, has something to do with internal, the lack of leadership. It's not where the capital is coming from. Even if it were raised from within, I think it will still be squandered. So I think we need to get away from these, foreign direct investment is the problem.
Yes.
Wean ourselves out of these things, pumping our chest, saying that, that. I seriously do not think that's where the problem lies. I think it's much, much more complex than that.
I think so, Mustafa. I agree with you. In fact, I have always advocated that we should get off of the international welfare line. That's what I call it. And internally, we have the dynamics, we have the resources. And whatever else we are lacking, we can depend on the outside. But it has to be from within. Fundamentally. You see, we see this lack mentality. Well, we don't have this, we don't have that. But we have a lot in this society. When COVID emerged, disastrously in Gambia and other places. There was a marathon on TV, and I'm sure many other places, and they raised a lot of money in the country. I didn't know that they could raise such money in the Gambia.
Yeah.
It's a lot of capital laying around that can be utilized. A lot of diasporans are going back, and with a little bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of diasporans over here too, in the US and other places. These are all sources of investment. In fact, diasporans spend more money and send more money to the Gambia
Then we get from.
and I like the investments,
Yeah.
it combined.
Yeah.
It itself really is a source of capital. And others are utilizing their diaspora, making strong contacts and ties. But for Gambia, I don't know what the Ministry of External Affairs is doing now, but there doesn't seem to be any effort to bring in the diaspora,
Tap into the resource.
the financial resources within the country. That's where it must be. I agree.
Well, Dawda, thank you very much. Moom daal pour jaxal wax ji dañ jël dëkk bi jokko waa Kawur rek affaire bi jeex tak. Thank you very much, Dr. Daw.
Thank you. Yeah. It's always, you know, like, yeah. Yeah, and the book, actually, I was just checking, it's on sale now. You'll get about 40% discount because it's 49. They're selling it for 29 right now on Amazon. So try to get it. It's the State and Society in the Gambia. You can go to Amazon, you will get it. And there are other, if you go there, you'll see the other books that he has written, Culture and Society and all that. So, and the third wave, the democratize, it's something, that was the one that he wrote in 2009.
The third wave.
Yeah, so,
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes.
Thank you so very much,
Absolutely.
Doctor.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
All right.
Appreciate you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Bakamane, Mante, I cannot hear you, and I'm not complaining. You know, for some reason I cannot hear.
The guy, he is cuckoo.
Oh, now I'm hearing you. No, honestly, this guy like Dr. Sain's last question. I could hear Dr. Sain.
Oh, you can hear me now? Okay, all right.
Now I can hear you. No, Barke Ilimana Gorjigen Lava. Biga like Dr. Sain, Deguma Darlinga.
I just was making sure that you could hear me.
And you know, Bankate, I am so happy because we got beat so seriously. Tay. Liverpool knew the defending champions. Aston Villa. How about you say Tottenham you do? Tottenham said the top 6.
A big team.
Liverpool was beaten 7-2.
Yeah, I wasn't watching that one.
You know what? Sumada practice. The man sold suma man you jacket. Momblai de mete. Tay was a good day.
Be careful now. You guys have number 13.
I don't care if we neka.
What do you
As long as that we lost, Liverpool lost, I don't care. But you know what? Man City was defeated last week. Man City, they were defeated 5-2. So there is a pattern going on.
But you on the other hand, how many?
On the
other hand, you know what?
Whatever. Well, anyway, I think it was definitely a great discussion.
It was a good one.
Yeah, definitely. And the minister, I've already sent him a text thanking him. I have to send him the link to watch it. And Dr. Sain, of course, always. We'll continue to do this. And I think next week we are expecting to have, is it Lamin Tamba? No, not Lamin Tamba. What's his name? Ja. From APR.
We'll bring Duduja.
We'll bring Duduja from the APRC.
He already, confirmed?
No. He's been waiting for the past 2 weeks.
Just making sure.
No, they're committed to it more.
Definitely.
They want to come here.
Yeah. They want to come. Bangalore had Jibril Fadi, not Buya God. Why sing with you here for Muji Yahoo? Because I'm going to walk around my nose. So we got Jamaica support. Rekmatak, whenever this guy consistent to figure out what they do in the saga. Monica is the exception, but anyway.
I don't know why they are still crazy about the man, but anyway, it is what it is. All right.
Yeah, but anyway, we'll be back here next Sunday for the people by the people, like always. Musa Jenkins na santial na ka minister bitay, you know, and then baka def ko be tapa botte gam gis nga botte botte do sa ko sax. It was a good one, guys. And ku am Flores dan
am na sa président bi corona yaa ngi sëqat de
maa ngi bëgg a corona bi tegal ko tegal yoo xam ne bëgguma mu def dama bëgg mu sonal ko sonal yoo xam ne waaye man ku ma bëgg a corona mu am corona moo ko abagul mos ko mic waaw anyway definitely demanding, guys.
All right, guys, no problem. All right.
Chiriteno, Nebanyan, Idemkaja, Chiungongo, Nebanyan, Idemkaja, Chinafulo, Nebanyan, Idemkaja, Katunchamo, Nebanyan, Idemkaja, Inji, Machina Ranch. Nebanyan, Idemkaja, Inji, Machina Ranch. Gini mangalwe